Sandez. We haven't met in person in quite some time. I think it's been 14 or 15 months. We've been having WebEx meetings, so feels good to be back in person. We do not have a mask mandate anymore. It's just highly encouraged to wear a mask. If you'd like to put one on, we have some on the back table. I read the mayor's office's letter dated May 14th, and it had an interesting statistic. Less than 50% of Davidson County is vaccinated at this point, so there's still a lot of unvaccinated people in the community, so it's always good to practice safe social distancing still even today. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to read the notice of appeal process, and then we'll move on with some public hearings. Thank you. Now that we're back in person, I've just been reminded we can go back to the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that if you're not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. Commissioners, Mr. Fields circulated before today the meeting minutes from our last month's virtual meeting. Have the commissioners had a chance to review those minutes?
We have.
Is there a motion regarding approval?
I would move to approve the minutes from the April 22nd, 2021 meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. We've got a couple of public hearings today. The first is under shared urban mobility devices. Mr. Fields.
In order to make any rule changes and make decisions that we've described on the agenda, you have to have a public hearing. Ms. Costonis, our legal advisor, is going to be talking about what the heart of it is. I'm not sure if you want to do that prior to the public hearing or if you want to let the public hearing and then describe it after.
I'm happy.
I'll defer back to the chair.
I'm happy to do it either way.
I think it would be helpful to remind us as well as let the public hear exactly what we're doing today before we get started.
Sure. So there are already existing regulations for shared urban mobility devices that were adopted by this commission a couple years ago. And so what I have done in preparation for this public hearing is prepared a red line of those regulations, and we have a handful of extra copies of that red line if anyone wants to come up and get one from Lisa. Also, the red line is posted and has been for maybe a little over 2 weeks at the Metro website. If you go into the Nashville.gov and find the calendar of events at the bottom of Nashville.gov's main home screen, there is, and then pick the Transportation Licensing Commission meeting off of that list of events, and then click on agenda. Within the agenda itself, there is an additional link to this redlined markup of the existing rules. So the commission does not have to adopt the proposed changes in the red line. They are meant to be kind of a jumping off place for discussion purposes. but we did get them out there as early as we could to comply with BL 2019-109. And so I am not going to necessarily, does that not work? Okay, sorry about that. I guess that does sound better. I'm not going to necessarily go through them in the order of the bullet points in the agenda, which is award of certificates, establish annual certificate fee, establish initial fleet size, and consider modification of some D operational hours. I'm instead going to go through in the order of the red lines in the draft, because I think that'll be less confusing. So if you want to come up and get an extra copy to follow along, that's fine. Or you can certainly follow along online as well. As we get to them, though, we will hit all of those bullet points. Okay, so starting on page 1 and scrolling down, and I will say, in addition to those bullet points, as we were going through, we realized like a couple of the citations were out of date and needed to be updated. A couple other things, maybe stylistic things, needed to be, fixed a little bit. So there's some other changes other than the 4 bullet points, but they should be non-controversial. Okay, so the first thing is non-controversial. It's in section 020, existing certificate holders permits. So the line permits previously granted pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 1262 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, prior Chapter 1262, as that chapter existed prior to the passage of substitute ordinance BL 2019-1658, the substitute ordinance, were terminated by the passage of the substitute ordinance and replaced by temporary permits such that each certificate holder was allowed to have a fleet size equivalent to 50% of the fleet size for which they had permits prior to the passage of the substitute ordinance. With regard to those temporary permits, all of that is deleted. And the reason for that deletion, I think, is pretty non-controversial, which is that was a reference to kind of the interim period between the passage of the council legislation and the award of the RFP. And that interim period is now over, and the commission is now, with its rulemaking, establishing the number of permits going forward. So to keep that in there was just confusing, so I crossed it out. So that paragraph, section 020, will now begin just each existing certificate holder, colon. So that's the first proposed change. And
the following language remains the same.
The following language remains the same. We did not change the rest of section 020. In section 02, okay, there's one tiny change in section, let's see, subsection 2, subsection 3 of 020. I just crossed out the word new preceding the word bond agreement, just because I didn't think that having new there made sense. So just a little stylistic change there. Section 025, I've changed the reference to the substitute ordinance BL number 2019-109. That is the current ordinance. And that is replacing a previous reference to BL 2019-1658. And BL, although the number is lower, BL 2019-109 was actually subsequent to 1658 and replaced it. So that was just updating that reference. And since 1658 had been a substitute ordinance and 109 was not, when I've kind of described the defined term, the ordinance, I've used that throughout, and previously it was the defined term substitute ordinance, and so I've crossed out substitute before ordinance each time that appears. So that's going to be throughout the document. Again, that's minor and stylistic. All right, scrolling down, it looks like nothing too much more in 3, other than another deletion of substitute as I just described. In 4, I'm not seeing any changes.
In 5, I'm not seeing changes. Oh, well, okay, 5L, there's a proposed change. And I don't know if you want me to just go through all of these and then you can come back and debate them, or if you want to debate them as they come up. But maybe we want to hear from people first.
We'll hear from people before
So in
deliberate.
050L, capital letter L is the subsection. There is an area, and this is the last bullet point on your list of bullet points on the agenda, which is consider modification of SUMD operational hours. So this is the original L, was operation of SUMDs is prohibited after 9 p.m. and before 5 a.m. period, is what it previously said. In discussion with one of the commissioners who had requested some changes, we added the proposed language except for bicycles and electric bicycles as defined below in 080B. So that'll be like, and there, we've received other requests from other folks who are here today probably to change that in different ways. So that probably will be the subject of some discussion. But this is just in here, like I said, as kind of a jumping off point. You know, this is what you know, staff of the commission's proposing, and obviously the commission does not have to go with that. They can do what they want. And then in M3, also in 050, there's a change, which is to subsection 3, no ride zone, any metropolitan greenways. And it used to say any metropolitan greenways, period. And we added, to the extent applicable, rules and regulations of the Board of Parks and Recreation would prohibit them. And that change was, again, kind of hand in hand with the original change to L. You know, there's an issue in terms of electric vehicles being used on greenways. The Parks Board prohibits that. And so the reason for that change would be if the Parks Board were to lift that prohibition, that way the electric vehicles would be able to be used on the greenways, but we believe that is an issue for the Parks Board to decide. And then section 060, data sharing, is probably the most substantially changed section of the ordinance. And that is because the language of BL 2019-109 was inconsistent with the existing regulatory section 060. So we have deleted pretty much all of it and replaced it with just the following statement. Department, Metro ITS, I didn't start at the beginning. Permitted operators shall provide the Metropolitan Information Technology Services Department, Metro ITS, with anonymized and aggregated location data sharing and open data information regarding SUMD locations, ridership, aggregated 5-trip minimum SUMD traffic patterns, and shall provide Metro's third-party vendor other data as required by Metro ITS in a format acceptable to Metro ITS and Metro ITS's third-party vendor. Metro's third-party vendor will contract with Metro for the specific purpose of aggregating and anonymizing the data provided to it by the operators for Metro's benefit. Such data provided to Metro's third-party vendor that constitutes raw data that is not anonymized and aggregated will not be hosted on Metro servers. So that change was made for 2 reasons. One was to make it exactly consistent with the language of BL 2019-109, because the language of the code, the ordinance, would prevail over any inconsistent language in the regulations. And secondly, it's to acknowledge that Metro will be using this third-party vendor. Is it okay to say it's currently Populous? Yeah, it's currently Populous, and the contract could change in the future, so we kept that reference neutral. We do RFPs every 5 years, usually for vendors, so I believe that is not too controversial, as I believe the awardees had all indicated that they work with Populous, so hopefully that won't be a problem, but basically all of the rest of section 060 following that statement is deleted. And then we'll go into section 070, and this is one of the big ones on your 4 bullet points on the agenda. This is the establish annual certificate fee along with related vehicle fees, bullet point agenda item. And it's section 070, capital letter A. And what staff has recommended, and again, this doesn't have to be the final version, the commission could go in a different direction, but we tried to just throw something out there as a jumping off point. Applicants shall pay a certificate fee of $10,000 per year, plus a fee of $141 per SUMD per year to the MTLC for the administrative costs, data-related costs, enforcement costs, and operational costs, including salaries and benefits of dedicated staff, and including related capital project costs, period. And then the rest of the changes to A are just a couple of deletions of the word substitute per that defined term I mentioned earlier. And then going down a little bit, so that'll obviously be something for much discussion later on, like whether that fee scheme is what they go with or whether something else is suggested and they prefer that or they come up with something of their own. So let's see, going down to 080B, each type of category of SUMD in a permitted operator's fleet shall be limited in number to the number determined through the RFP process. I crossed that out. That was what was previously in the regulations because that RFP process is now complete. So I thought it would be confusing to leave it in there. And we've replaced it with proposed new subsection B, which says each operator shall be allowed to have an initial fleet of 500 scooters each. In addition to the 500 scooters, within 3 months of the date of the issuance of their certificate of public necessity and convenience, each operator shall offer to the public a number of powered or non-powered bicycles equivalent in number to the ratios of bikes to scooters that they propose to have in their response to the RFP. Any powered bikes that the operators add to their fleet per this provision must meet the definition of Class 1 electric bicycles as defined in Tennessee Code Annotated 558301. Any other types of powered bicycles would be subject to the further fleet expansion criteria in subsection C of the section below. And at this point, subsection C is actually reserved. We don't have that language ready to propose to you here today. That will be a subsequent rulemaking public hearing just to discuss that 080C because it will be a pretty complicated discussion, and this is already complicated enough as it is. But we are certainly open to suggestions from either the commissioners or the public in terms of what that 080C should say. So if you have like written suggestions that you would like to submit, we'll certainly be glad to review them.
Teresa, just so it's clear, 080C deals with expansion of the fleets in the future. Okay.
So that's going to be the criteria for going beyond the initial 500 amount plus the bicycles that they're allowed to have in addition to that per their responses to the RFP. So we're the original BL 2019-109 had a criterion that the regulation should be performance-based. And so that fleet expansion criteria is where we saw an opportunity to apply that, to create incentives for people to have good high levels of compliance with these regulations and with the code. And if they do that, then presumably they would be eligible for fleet increases.
But today that's not on the table.
Today that is not on the table, but that is definitely a contentious issue for future discussion, I would imagine. All right, going further down, I think that is it. I think we have now talked about all 4 of the bullet points.
Can I ask a question about M3 regarding the greenways?
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand. It says no ride zone any metropolitan greenways to the extent applicable rules and regulations of the Board of Parks and Regulations would permit them.
So right now.
Wait. My question is, are we pitching this over to the Parks and Recreations to establish the regulation?
Yes, we are, and that is required. Under the charter is very clear that the Board of Parks and Recreation has exclusive authority over the operations of parks property. And so the change is, before we just had, you can't use them on the greenways, period.
Right.
So if parks were to relax that regulation and allow these vehicles to be used on the greenways, our rule would then become inconsistent with that. So instead of leaving it that way, I'm proposing that we add this additional language so that if parks establishes a more flexible rule to allow electric bicycles and scooters, whatever, somebodies of any kind on their greenways that are powered, then they would be consistent with this rule as well, and they would be allowed to under this rule as well. We just want them to follow what the Parks Board dictates.
So when my fellow bike riders complain to me about somebody's on the greenways blocking their travel, I can tell them to talk to Parks and Recreations, not me.
Yes.
Can I speak to that? Because I'm going to.
Mr. Rogers,
Go ahead.
if there is a problem on the Greenway with a SUMD at the present time, as rules stand, have them contact me, please. Thank you.
But also parks that have its own police force and can
They can
enforce their own regulations.
If I could say something, I'm not going to push this today, honest. We're talking about two different things, scooters and e-bikes. There's a state law on e-bikes. And some of us think that parks doesn't have authority to regulate e-bikes, including these. So let's don't get into that today. It could go on for a while. So I was going to recommend a change to that. That would take parks out and just say, we'll follow the law. But again, I'm not going to do that. But that it will be an issue, I can assure you, pretty soon.
All right, do you guys want to go back and talk about the bullet points in order, or do you want to go back and talk about the more controversial issues in the order in which they appear? Or do we want to hear from people?
No, let's go ahead and start the public hearing, and then we'll have a greater discussion on the various bullet points. So I've got two requests to speak on the matter. The first is Mr. Kevin Warner. Um, 3 minutes is what we've been traditionally allowing, but it really depends.
Depends on what?
Depends on if you get peppered with questions. We
Oh.
we don't count that against you.
Okay. Kevin Warner, I was here 2 years ago at this microphone and said, the only thing that matters is the lack of enforcement. I don't believe that's changed. However, the operators are making a move to more effective use of technology. They're doing things that can control the speed of the vehicles and locations and so on. But it's still, I believe the environment is totally lacking anything when it comes to moving violations, which is what I believe the problem is, and everyone I've heard at any venue complain about the broad issues talked about, driving them on the sidewalks, on the streets, helter-skelter, on greenways where people like to ride their bicycles more safely, as Mr. Rogers is alluding to, I believe, So everything is in place for you to lean hard in that direction. You can collect whatever fees you want to pay for, among other things, enforcement costs. For those of you who've read my very recent email and emails prior to that, the technology is out there. I've confirmed it. I contacted people in the field. The technology is there. I don't believe it's prohibitively expensive, but if you're raising tens of thousands of dollars a year with the fees, if not more, as you choose, then you should consider, I believe, trying some of this technology out. And to me, the simple step would be at one of your meetings, prior to one of your meetings, invite people from the technology sector to say, tell us about what do you got? We have individuals that we'd like to be able to enforce something like scooter. It's very easy. It'd be so easy. I'd be amazed if they don't already know about the concept of scooters in an urban environment. Say, we would like to give enforcement individuals something that will make it easy for them. There are chips in the scooters now, I'm told, and I'm sure they could be improved so that, listen, if you've read my emails, you know what I'm going to say. It's out there. You can do something about it if you choose. I believe it's your obligation as stewards for safety in the city to pursue this. It hasn't been done, to my knowledge, I could be dead wrong, by this body, and I hope something changes so that you can turn these into the very useful and desirable means of transportation many people think they are, but without sacrificing public safety. I do not want to be that individual who's no longer nimble enough on my feet when I'm walking somewhere with my wife and it's too late for us to avoid danger when we hear some idiot go, oh, look out! And then all of a sudden, there's a collision. And if I'm still able and that person's moving, the cops will be called because I have been responding the way I think somebody should respond when they're run down by scooters. So I don't want that to happen to anybody. We've been lucky. Only one bad crash had to do with alcohol. But so please, try to make this better. You've got the power to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Next is Frank Speck.
I'm not Frank, but Frank has asked that I go first. I'm Sam Reed. I'm with Byrd, Chairman,
All right.
Vice Chair, members of the commission. Appreciate it, and it's really good to be here today. It's been obviously a long time since we've been able to meet in person. A lot has happened. Thought I'd just briefly recap things from our perspective. I was just looking today at some materials. Almost 2 years ago to the day was when there was a move by the administration at the time to try to ban scooters, and this is what sort of set us off in the direction that we are really arrived at today, nearly 2 years later, where we asked the council to go through an RFP process where we would limit the providers, which we have now done. And now we are embarking at the beginning of a period of time now where we are going to enter into this new phase where we're going to hold these three providers to very, very high standards. And then you all will be able to judge us accordingly going on now month to month, either taking scooters away from us, rewarding us with more, but overall holding us to high standards, hearing what we're doing. We've already had several meetings as the sort of three selected providers with many times with Billy. We've met with the police to talk about some of the issues that were just raised around rider behavior. And I really just want to reiterate that we are here to be committed as partners with Nashville as we enter this new phase, and we think that this is hopefully the beginning of something that is going to be far, far better for our community. I wanted to touch on briefly the three sort of big things that we're going to be making a decision on today. First is the fees, and we have, as providers, we've gotten together with the city and have made proposals in that regard. The fees today, as you know, they're $35 a scooter and a $500 application fee. For 500 scooters annually, that's $18,000 to the city. We made proposals based around where we're seeing a lot of cities move, which is to a per ride fee, right, which would sort of align the city's incentives with the scooter companies' incentives, whereas the more rides that were happening, the more fees that the city would collect. We can go through why we think that's a good idea or why not. We've seen the city's proposal. It's obviously a significant increase, now going up to $141 per scooter. That represents about a 4.5 times increase over where we were before. But we understand some of the things around enforcement, signage, additional parking areas, some staffing. So, I think while it's a big jump, in the spirit of partnership, certainly from the perspective of Bird, you'll hear from others, we're willing to accept that increased fee with a understanding that those are going to be used to make the program better. We would just ask that as we consider, things like fleet increase criteria, curfews, that, that spirit of partnership also flows both ways. So let me touch on quickly the fleet size, which I know you'll be talking about today. The starting fleet size in the contract is 500. It's been in every version of the contract that we've considered. And sorry, if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute just to quickly run through these. That represents a status quo. This fleet size enables us to have a modest return on our investment, where we can invest in things like people power, storage, educational outreach, helmet giveaways, enables us to offer discounted rates, fulfill equity requirements, those sorts of things. We've been operating at 500 for quite some time through this entire sort of interim period. If we were to reduce that, that would mean jobs lost. That would mean for us about four positions for every 100 scooters. We're already at a very high utilization rate here, one of the highest in the countries. It would make it harder and harder for folks to find scooters if it was reduced. We've made investments based on that 500 number. We brought new equipment here, which you've seen, which we're really excited about and proud of. We would just ask that we start there in good faith as partners to move forward, and then we can judge accordingly based on our performance whether or not that should be reduced or increased as we go through the program. Last thing is curfew. For the first year of operation here, the curfew was set at midnight. After the push to ban scooters and the compromise bill was passed, the council passed a bill that said 10 p.m. curfew on weeknights and 11 p.m. on weekends. At a subsequent meeting at the TLC, there was a motion to push it back to 9 p.m. for every night of the week, and that motion passed. Even with that 9 p.m. curfew, we're seeing several hours of nighttime riding every day. And we've had no real major incidents or negative reports since 2019. There are some that would like the restrictions to be lifted completely, like it is in many other cities in which we operate. I will say Nashville has about the most restrictive curfew anywhere in the country. I understand also that I live here, we have a very unique situation. And in terms of what we see in terms of ridership in the city. And so, and obviously a lot of transportation vehicles that add to the stresses of our streets. What we would propose is something that would look at this incrementally, maybe going to midnight during the weekdays when we think that these would be much more used by workers who are getting home after dark.
Mr. Reed, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
You said that currently there have been several hours of nighttime riding already, and there haven't been any major instances. Are you talking about prior to 9 p.m. or?
Well, yes.
Rider violation?
So obviously the 9 p.m. curfew means that we've got in the wintertime, 3 hours, 4 hours of nighttime riding. And right now, look, it's getting dark a little later, but I think we've had some experience of nighttime. If the fear is nighttime riding, right?
I understand.
That's
that.
what I was speaking to. So
Okay.
forgive me. That we've
How do
had.
you feel about the 5 o'clock start time?
I think the 5 o'clock start time is fine. I think more for us where we're seeing a lot of people opening the app and looking to be able to ride is after that 9 p.m. period of time, right? Again, we understand there are big stresses on particularly downtown on the weekends, and we know what folks are doing down there. And so we understand that if this commission saw fit to either keep those hours more restrictive on the weekends, we saw that happen in Memphis, and it seemed to have a good result, where they cut off rides at midnight on the weekends, but allowed rides to run 24/7 during the week. So I think we would we would suggest an incremental approach, right? Not to rip the Band-Aid off completely and let's go 24/7. We would really, I can walk you through what some other cities have done, but, I would say I'm looking at, surrounding cities like Memphis, Charlotte, Louisville, Durham, all in recent months have either lifted their curfew entirely or have made it less restrictive than it was before. And we have not seen the types of incidents that were referred to earlier. And so we would just ask, if you look at our equipment, for instance, it's way better lighting today than it was in the versions that we had before. So I know I've run way over my time. You may have some additional questions. I will be here to answer them as the discussion unfolds. But
I would like to hear specifically what other cities' operations of time windows are, not
Okay.
just a generality that they've lifted them.
Sure. So I just covered Memphis, right, which is midnight on the weekends and unrestricted use from Monday through Thursday.
All right. Charlotte?
Charlotte, I actually don't, it's just said it, I just have here on my notes, and I will get these to you, it's just extended operating hours in the fall of 20. I'll find out and can report back to you before this meeting ends. I can, at Durham, for instance, they eliminated hours of operation in August of 2020, and the previous hours were 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. In Louisville, operating hours were extended in the fall of 20, and my apologies, I don't have the specifics for either of those, but I can get them quickly.
Any other city you have right now that has specifics like Portland, Austin?
I don't, but I mean, I know that they're all far less, I'm not aware of any other market that cuts off at 9 p.m., every single day of the week. Look, again, we have this commission made the decision, well over a year ago to restrict them to where we did for reasons that I think were probably somewhat prudent at the time. But I think as we've sort of seen some improvement in operating the operator behavior and rider behavior somewhat, and we're working to improve that, I think just so that this commission can have the data that can we start to lift them incrementally? I asked my team to pull some stats about what our incidence rates are in terms of reported incidents, and our reported incident rate through our app, and again, understanding this is not perfect, not everybody who gets in an incident reports it, but 0.0067 percentage of rides, so a fraction of 1%, tiny fraction of 1% reported an incident on a bird in the last year. So anyway, that's really where I want to end it. I guess, again, just committing certainly from our perspective of moving forward in partnership and, trying to really make this work and be less of a nuisance and more of an asset to the city.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
You said you guys have made some improvements to the bikes, and that that number is reported accidents. When you guys pick up the bikes and they're damaged, dented, things are broken on them, are those incidents included in some type of report?
Yes, it would be a separate report. It would be a damage incident report. Obviously, it's hard to know whether damage is from somebody riding it or somebody potentially vandalizing or getting knocked over or some other reason that the vehicle could get damaged. I can also share with you damage reports, and that's something that will be part of the populous data sharing that comes to the city is reports of damaged vehicles. Yes, sir.
Mr. Warner presented a minute ago that there's technology out there that would allow an enforcement officer to point an instrument at a bike and be able to identify the bike and rank serial number and be able to ticket it on the spot, and then through the company, and so the company would then
Yes.
be able to notify the rider. I don't know if it's instantaneous, but it would happen, and all of a sudden the rider's got a bill for some fine of some sort. Is that technology available that you're aware of?
So it exists. I am not aware. So obviously, I think it becomes easier in an environment where you have a limited set of providers that all have sufficient levels of technology, right? I know that we have that technology that exists today. Are we using it with the police? No, we've had one meeting with them. We've talked about rider messaging when we've put some customized messaging into the app that every rider sees every time at the request of the MMPD. I think as we move through this, now once we get this agreement signed, we can start to look at things that are more creative like that, like sidewalk beacons to keep people off of sidewalks.
You're saying it's not used here in Nashville. Your company's all across the nation, right?
Yes, across the world.
World, okay. Is it being used anywhere?
I honestly don't know the answer to that
I
question.
want to know the answer to that question next time I see you, okay? And you'll
Yes.
probably be back here to discuss the expansion
Exactly, yes.
protocol. I really want to know the answer, if it's being used somewhere, and can you do it here?
Yes.
Because
The answer is.
it seems to me that's
yes.
going to be a real quick deterrent to a number of people misusing the units if they see a $100 charge on their credit card that's been used to even initiate the operation of the unit.
There is no question that a fine would quickly.
I mean, immediately.
Yes.
It's going to be on their credit card.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a powerful idea.
There may be
it's
some due
possible,
process
but-
issues there about finding somebody before
Right.
they've even had a hearing, but,
Yes.
but
That's right.
if there's that warning out there, I think it's going to have a deterrent effect of people operating on the sidewalks.
Yes. I think, look, we can make Nashville a playground of innovation in this regard, and we stand ready to be the partners to do it. So, yes, that's something I'll have an answer for you on.
I like
next
that
time I see you.
terminology, a playground of innovation.
Yes.
Figuratively,
That's the whole
literally.
purpose of us kind of arriving, hopefully, at this point. And hopefully, we can get the agreement signed today and move on. But thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Frank Speak. I'm the Director of Government Partnerships at SPIN. I would just echo Sam's comments. We've been operating in Nashville for the last 2 years, and we are very excited to have been given the opportunity to be one of the limited vendors to operate in the next program. We stand ready to partner with the city and Billy and the Nashville Police Department in identifying and implementing new technologies and strategies to reduce the negative impacts that shared urban mobility devices have in the community, and then also finding ways to maximize the benefits that they bring to your community. I'll leave my comments short. If you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, but I think in the interest of time, everything's been pretty much covered that I'd like to talk about.
Well, Spin, or Mr. Speak.
I misread your last name. It looked like a.
Oh, that's
it looked
okay.
like a
It happens
C.
a
I'm
lot,
sorry.
so no, that's fine.
So my question again, is the radio frequency ID being used by Spin anywhere in this country?
So we operate.
Just yes or no?
Not that I'm aware of. I'll have to look into that as well.
Thank you.
I do think enforcement is going to be critical. I mean, I see, and it's anecdotal, but I mean, more often than not, I see rider violation when I see a scooter with a passenger on it. I mean, or with a rider on it. They're on the sidewalk. There's 2 people on it. I mean, so I do think enforcement is going to be critical going forward, and making it as easy as possible for the Metropolitan Police Department to enforce those laws is going to be important too. So.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And all the vendors met with the Nashville Police Department a few weeks ago to talk about education strategies. You know, one of the things that SPIN does is we hire full-time W-2 employees in all of the markets that we operate. And so, you know, we strategically place those individuals throughout the service area to monitor to compliance, to correct scooters that are improperly parked or that might be blocking the right of way. And so as we scale up to the initial 500, I mean, we've already made those investments that are ready to be deployed today to scale up to the 500, and we have the employees and the resources to monitor and manage our fleet. So, but to your point, enforcement is absolutely a key component of that.
All right.
Do you have on the street right now?
250.
I think if I remember right, one of the proposals, and I think it was one of the winners, talked about how they could monitor when somebody was on the sidewalk. Did I make that up?
That's with the transponders, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a similar issue. Do you have that kind of?
So we don't use the transponders. We have drover technology. So usually with shared scooters, there's two primary issues. One, sidewalk riding, and two, parking compliance. People improperly parking their scooter that blocks the right of way. We have Drover technology that is sidewalk detection, and we will be deploying some of those scooters in our fleet to test it out in the core, like downtown area. But we also have a platform called Spin Hubs, which are electric docking stations where we can incentivize users to end their trip at this station. So they might get a 50% discount on their ride if they end their trip at this station. And it does two things for us. One, it creates the benefit of having more compliant parking. But two, it helps our operations and not having to constantly manage and rearrange the scooters because those stations also charge the scooters as well. So it helps us operationally. And we would be more than happy to discuss, building out a mobility network to strategically install those hubs throughout the service area, especially in areas where you're seeing a lot of parking issues and ADA compliant concerns.
And I might point out, Mr. Fields can correct me, I'm a real nerd. I was reading the Public Works budget the other day, the new staffing they're asking for, and it said one staff person for the commission. Is that correct?
We actually made a request for two. It appears that there's at this point, it looks like one. I'm still working.
Oh,
The
okay.
council's got it, so.
Okay, so if we have a point of view about that, we could talk to our council person.
Certainly could.
Okay, we'll do that. And so that person can go around and pick up the scooters that are laying across sidewalks.
We've also proposed a TLC truck.
Okay, no more comment.
Great, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Lime, there was a little miscommunication with Lime in terms of being present, and I'll take credit for that. But they did want to say, and I sent a copy of this to you before the meeting, they said that this is Mr. Robert Gardner. He says, "I'll reiterate our deep commitment to serving Nashville for the next several years so we can work with a variety of regulations. But we just want to be clear where we're at." So in other words, they're prepared to work with the regulations as that have been described today. And they have been a part of the group meetings we've had with vendors, police, and so forth.
All right, thank you. At this point in time, we'll close the public.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's some other folks that may have not gotten here.
Okay, I didn't get their request to speak, so I apologize.
I'm not sure they got them filled out. I apologize.
Do we have any of those forms, additional forms?
There may just be one person that,
Well, let me just do it this way. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on the issue? All right, if you'll please state your name out loud for the record.
Sure. My name is Amy Crownover, and I'm the Executive Director of Greenways for Nashville, the nonprofit organization that's been around for 26 years in support of the Parks Department Greenways.
Thank you.
So thank you, commissioners. And I simply have a question statement. It sounds like technology has been mentioned, and in not enforcement, but rather having these devices, follow the guidelines that are in your documentation. So I simply wanted to state that the evidence for the operators, the scooters that are out there today and are being operated, they have been observed and reported as being on the greenways. So the no ride zone mentioned the sidewalks, the greenways are also no ride zones. They are on the greenways now. We've submitted some reports. We've had users submit reports to us, complaints actually. And the geofencing that we understood would perhaps be the technology to protect the greenways is not effective. And it may be there's some fine tuning there, but last weekend, we had several pictures sent in of multiple scooters on the Cumberland River Greenway, on the 440 Greenway. Didn't see any on the Shelby Bottoms. So I am appealing to you to address this, to uphold the parks, greenways, no ride zone for anything shared mobility device that's motorized. It is the parks rule. Correct, the parks does have jurisdiction, but if they don't have the technology to keep them off of the greenways now, it really doesn't make sense to go forward. And if they do have that technology, it needs to be deployed to an effective level. It's not today.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
These companies promised to bring electric bikes to Nashville. I assume they're still
It sounded like
planning to
that
do
was
it?
part of the
They-
expansion, fleet expansion.
Right. Legally, they're considered an SUMD, just like scooters. Does your rule apply to electric bikes?
So I am representing Greenways for Nashville. I don't speak on behalf of the Parks Department or the Parks Board, so I would not be the authority there. It would be probably Metro Legal.
Well, how do you understand it operate?
I'd rather not get into that debate. I don't think that's, my opinion is probably not relevant to you all.
Well, I've got one. I don't care if it's relevant or not.
Any other questions?
No, but thank you for
And I
bringing that to our
brought the map,
attention.
Billy has it, but these are the greenways, the 100 miles of greenways that are no ride zones.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. Why is it a problem if I can ride a scooter from, say, Ascend Theater to Rolling Mill Hill? If I want to go to lunch or something, why is that a problem?
So again, I think we're talking about opinions, and the greenways are protected. They are park space. They are created for users of all abilities. They're crowded, and they're not currently designed, nor has the 100 miles been designed to accommodate motorized anything. They're packed now. If anything happened during COVID, it was Greenway's usership has just, quadrupled, gone exponentially higher. So it is a space that is like a sidewalk. There are bikes on it, obviously, self-propelled, but the motorization does add an element of concern,
So
and it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is the problem the number of vehicles or
So
the
again,
speed of vehicles? or-
I think it's a parks rule question you're asking me about, and I'm advocating on behalf of the users who want to protect the greenways. I'm not a
all of
lawyer,
us.
and I'm not privy to all of the, what's been done before, but the rules are clear. And that's what y'all acknowledge, that there are no ride zones. So I think it's just
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Amy Crownover.
Crownover, well, thank you so much
Sure.
for bringing to our attention the geofencing issue. And
And that was
I think-
truly the point. Any device that comes in that's a shared urban mobility device needs to have that same geofencing and, or whatever the technology is, and it needs to work. And we have users out there letting us know when it's not, which
right.
we're happy to share with Billy, and he's happy to receive.
And certainly have. And I'm certain we'll continue to.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the issue before us, before I close the public hearing? At this point in time, we'll close the public hearing with regard to the shared urban mobility devices and the proposed regulations for shared urban mobility devices and open it up for deliberation by the commissioners. We've got a quorum here today. We don't have everyone, but we do have a quorum, so we can decide what, if any, changes to the regulations that are currently in place to put forth going forward as authorized by BL 2019-109. So I think it makes sense to go through kind of in order like Ms. Costonis did prior to hearing from the public. And it looked like several of the suggested changes were non-controversial, removing reference to the substitute ordinance. I presume my fellow commissioners don't have a problem making those types of corrections. And as Ms. Costonis rightly pointed out, where we're probably going to have the greater debate amongst ourselves is going to be the hours of operation, perhaps the language, as Mr. Rogers pointed out, for the no ride zones, and as well as the fees to be implemented under section 070. So why don't we,
Can I ask you a question
go ahead.
first? Is our role today to decide about awarding the certificates to the three companies, Lime, Bird, and Spin, and then also to consider the revisions for the or to setting these different regulations? Is that our role today?
No, I think our role today is to decide what the initial fleet size is going to be. I think they've already been awarded to those three companies.
The certificate is, the process of certificate for public convenience and necessity basically matches up with the ordinance and the direction we need to go. So what we would do is ask that those three contractors that you've already approved the contracts on and are now going through the signing process with Metro to make them official, to go ahead and award certificates of public convenience and necessity. They actually will run whatever the contract term is for 1 year.
But we have to decide the number of awards we're going to give them.
No, the certificate is just the overall, I'm sorry,
That's what I'm
that
asking.
is a separate thing. That determines, these are the operators.
Okay.
So, and then you would go to the other four issues, or the other four issues, and talk about fees, the fleet size, whether or not you like the language on the data sharing, and then if you want to make any changes to operations.
So we start with whether we're going to award certificates to Lime, Bird, and Spin to begin with, and then we get to the details.
I think you all did previously affirm the decision to select the three operators by the purchasing agent. But I think really kind of maybe bullet points 1 and 3 can be conflated, because normally when we do, an award of certificates, we assign a number of vehicles associated with it. So we have made a proposal about the 500 70s, the scooters, as an initial award, and then within the 3-month period, the additional rollout of bikes or e-bikes, proportional to the amount that that each company stated in their response to their RFP that they could provide. They each gave us a proportion of bikes to scooters that they could provide comfortably. And I believe that was 4-to-1 with Lime, 8.5-to-1 with Bird, and 10-to-1 with Spin.
I'm still back to the question, are we going to be making the decision today to award certificates of public convenience and necessities or not?
Yeah, you will be with
Okay.
the associated figure of the number of vehicles that will be associated with each certificate. But I don't think we're at the point where we're going to not award any of these three companies a certificate, because that was kind of approved at the previous meeting. And like Billy said, we are actually in the process currently of getting the contracts with the three companies that have resulted out of the RFP process signed.
So I'm just wanting to address Ms. Crownover's suggestion, which is if they can't stay off the greenways, don't give them the certificate. And I want to make sure we're really not in that position today.
If I can, I think our normal process for the commission has been for all of the industries that we provide certificates of public convenience and necessity. Ms. Costones is right, and I should have actually reflected that on the agenda, and I apologize for that. Normally what you would do, and if you recall the taxi cab process that you've certainly exercised over the last 7 or 8 years, what you would do is you'd award a certificate and then whatever number of vehicles you'd like to provide with it. Our recommendation is, yes, you would award certificates and 500 each. The other issues, the truth of the matter is, if there becomes issues, we would bring them back for a hearing in front of the commission to talk about their the number of vehicles they have, if they might be in jeopardy if they were not to follow the rules. However, we also are going to have to create a rule that addresses expansion and reduction in the future, but not necessarily today, or any of the Greenway rules, other than, in other words, following the rules of the Parks Department.
So there already are existing provisions in the existing rules, the ones that are not being changed today, the one that are not redlined but are in black in the copy that you have, that allow us to discipline the operators that hold certificates. And I believe taking scooters away is one of the, from their fleets is one of the options for disciplinary action, but that would be subject to due process.
And I wasn't trying to belabor it down that far and everything. I just wanted to know, are we being to consider awarding certificates or not today?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it is, if I may, I think this is weird and unique. We almost never do an RFP in the context of a regulatory permitting process. And so trying to marry those two things is very challenging. So, I mean, the certificates aren't, you know, I mean, they're not just symbolic, they're actual pieces of paper that Billy's office actually issues. And I don't think that's happened yet because they need to know the number that's associated with it. And that's a decision that you have to make today. But in addition to that, we actually have contracts that you all approved the form of previously with some changes at the last meeting. And then the meeting prior to that, you did approve the purchasing agent's recommendation of awarding to these three companies based on their responses to the RFPs. So those two decisions have already been made. So it's really just issuing the paper certificate with the associated number of vehicles that will be in their fleet to go along with it. Is that right, Billy?
I think that.
So
I believe
our
that's
real
right.
contingency is really only the number of bikes.
And I can't make a motion for you. If I were making a motion, what I would probably say, I would move to approve certificates of public convenience and necessity for the three companies and award each company 500 scooters. Is that?
Well, plus the bikes within the 3-month
Sure,
period.
SUMDs, I'm sorry, yes.
Sorry. And we came to that number, I believe we previously discussed that number at an earlier meeting because the number was much higher, some as many as 1,000 per company, up to, I believe, 1,200 at one time when we had a number of companies. So that
Yeah.
number has previously been discussed and almost appropriated as a safe number, given that we only had a select amount of companies.
So that is correct. So basically, the BL 2019-109 specifically said that for the initial award, you could award up to 500 scooters each. So you could award less than 500 scooters each. For the initial award, you can't award more than that. However, once we adopt the fleet expansion provisions to the regulation, that again, we will probably discuss at a future meeting. I think Billy and I were thinking maybe July. Then they would be able to, if you all want to adopt provisions that would allow them to do that, they would be able to expand their fleets beyond that. Because the bikes were contemplated as a part of the RFP process, we wanted to go ahead and allow that to be done within a relatively short time frame, because that's, you know, something that was desirable for Metro, is to have bikes and or e-bikes available in addition to the scooters. So that was the reason for the recommendation of allowing them within the first 3 months to additionally roll out the number of scooters proportional to their 500 fleet, if you award 500 to each. That they had said that they could do that ratio of bikes to scooters in their responses to the RFPs. So it's the 500 each. And really, I would defer to Billy on that. That's an operational decision if 500 works, and I think he was comfortable with that.
I believe we got to the 500. There were, at one point, there were 4,125 scooters, I think, on the streets. Several of the operators left the fleets. Then the council actually passed in either, I guess in 109, saying they would reduce the fleets by half. At the time, everybody there, their fleets went half. Bird had 1,000, Lime had 1,000 and Spin had 500. So they each went to 500 each. Then that's where the language of the council, I think, came back that said we can go up to 500. And I do feel very comfortable staying at the 500 and bringing Spin up to the same level. So we'll start having apples and apples to be evaluating through the process, as well as the looking at performance objectives and that sort of thing.
And I will just add, just to clarify also, if you look at section 020, the beginning of section 020 in the red line, you can see the crossed out language at the very beginning of that section actually refers to what Billy was just referring to, which was the 50% fleet size of their existing fleet. So basically in 2019, like midsummer 2019 was when I think those numbers were at their peak in terms of, you know, having like 7 companies operating and some of them having as many as 1,000 in their fleet. And then council actually discussed a total ban of scooters, but ended up doing something less than that and just cutting the existing companies to half of what they had as of that, I think it was July 1, 2019 date. And so that ended up being 500 for Bird and Lime each and 250 for Spin. And there were a number of other competitors out there back at that time, but most of those companies have either gone out of business or were not awardees as a result of the certificate, the RFP process.
To kind of take this in bites, so maybe we should consider bullet point number 1 and entertain a motion awarding certificates and the number of scooters, and then move on to the next issues.
Ready for a motion?
Yes.
I will make a motion to award certificates of public convenience and necessity for SUMD for Lime, Bird, Spin in the amount of 500 units each.
May I add or seek a clarification?
Sure.
Okay, if you look in your draft at section 080B,
Correct.
there is proposed language there that does that, that has the reference to the 500 scooters each, and also has the reference to the bicycles. And so my question would be, does your motion include adoption of the proposed language in section 080B?
All right. I'll amend my motion I'll move to award certificates of public convenience and necessity for SUMD contractors, operators, Lime, Bird, Spin, consistent with the revised language in 080B.
And I'll second for the purposes of discussion. I got questions. Okay. Could you just?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand your second.
Oh, because I want to ask some questions.
Okay, so don't second and ask questions.
Oh, okay, I second. How's that?
I mean, I think that's commonly done, is that you second, but you go, just to allow discussion to proceed, and you can still move to amend thereafter
Okay.
if you want to.
Okay, how many, is 500 the total, including bicycles, or is it 500 scooters plus bicycles?
It's 500 scooters plus bicycles.
Okay, how many bicycles? That's
Okay,
all I care
so
about.
I'm going to say this from memory, so y'all check my math, and Billy, correct me, maybe you remember, but, so each of them has 500. So with Lime, it was 4-to-1, so that would be 125. The 8.5-to-1, I believe it was 63. That was Bird. And then 10-to-1's pretty easy. That would be 50. So 125 plus 63 plus 50. And does anyone have the total of that?
That was like 238, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds right. 238 bicycles in addition to the 1,500 scooters.
And those numbers are based on the proposals they made as part of the RFP process.
Can we round up 63 to 65? Is it? Yeah. So this is just allowing them to do it. It's not requiring them, obviously.
Correct.
I think that's up to you.
Right. Oh,
Well,
really?
No, now, when you read this language, though, it says, each operator shall offer to the public a number of
Oh,
powered,
really?
non-powered bicycles equivalent to the number in the ratios of bikes to scooters that they propose to have in their responses to the RFP.
That's right.
Now, the shall language that I learned in law school was mandatory, so.
So the responses to the RFP are actually, this is again where it gets tricky in terms of us having like a regulatory process, regulatory permitting process, and also an RFP that resulted in the award of a contract. In general, we tried to reconcile those by making the contracts incorporate by reference the regulations, so that, you know, they are required by the contracts to follow the regulations. However, the solicitation and the responses are also incorporated by reference into those contracts. So what they propose to do in their responses is a part of the contract that they either already have signed or will be signing.
Does Mr. Reed and Mr. Speak understand that that is mandatory?
I agree with you, Counselor, the shall.
I'm not a counselor, but okay. I'm a commissioner.
But yes, that is understood.
Where's your partner?
He's right here.
Okay.
Yeah, agree with the
Okay.
same.
All right. We don't have Lime here, but Lime did say in their letter that they see no daylight between Spin and Bird, so, in their position, so,
To my knowledge, they're satisfied.
all right. So you guys understand the language shall means you will put these bikes out there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, yes.
Yes is yes.
For sure. There's reason for discussion on that, I think. We could take that up as a subsequent meeting, but yes.
If I may, just for clarification purposes, I think one of the things that was not in existence at the time of, certainly not when we started the RFP process, was the role of B-Cycle coming back into Nashville. They withdrew their manual pedal bicycles.
Right, yes.
And they are coming back with, I believe, 300 e-bikes. When they are docked bikes, we specifically deal with dockless SUMDs. From a definition standpoint, and I'll go back to legal, this is where I usually get in trouble. It's my impression and my belief that their vehicles would qualify as SUMDs. However, they are not dockless. Therefore, they're not within the current framework of what we do. So I think I think it would be a prudent discussion, since there's like a 90-day period here we're talking about, to have a conversation about how does this all fit together with B-Cycles in terms of, because what we're talking about, unless I can add in, it's possible, if they did what they had is 248 cycles plus the 300, so you're talking about really more electric bikes coming into Nashville than scooters. Bicycles take up more space, and I'm not saying we should have them or not, but from a size standpoint, they're physically larger. Now, again, I'm not saying that makes them better or worse, because I certainly respect Commissioner Rogers and have worked with him many times, including 2 terms on this commission, working with him. But I do think it would be appropriate to talk about how does it fit together, and it does not diminish your authority to make decisions and their responsibility to do what they said do. I think it's just a conversation that maybe should be had as we go forward, and certainly lean on the expertise of Mr. Rogers and his background in bicycles. Now here's where Ms. Costona says, now, Mr. Fields.
No, I'm just going to read some of the definitions from, so the code chapter that governs this is chapter 1262. And 1262.010, which has remained in place throughout the various amendments to that chapter that have been represented by the ordinances that we have referred to, 1658 and 109. And so that has the relevant definitions, and so I will read them. I'll read several to you. So urban mobility device means bicycles, tricycles, scooters, hoverboards, skateboards, pedal cars, and other similar devices, whether they're powered or non-powered. A UMD does not include devices used as assistive mobility devices by persons with disabilities. So UMD is a pretty broad definition, but if you own your own UMD, you are not regulated by these rules. You are not SUMD systems. We have a separate definition of shared urban mobility. SUMD system means a system which provides urban mobility devices for short-term rentals for point-to-point trips. Such a system can be locked to SUMD systems or dockless SUMD systems. So it can be both, but the phrase point-to-point is really key in that definition. That means that you are not necessarily starting out or not necessarily ending your trip at the same place that you started out. So based on that, Mr. Rogers and I have talked about the fact that a bike shop, for example, is not a system because a SUMD system, because they're not for point-to-point trips. You have to return the bike to the shop that you rented it from at the end of your rental period. And then the definition of locked to shared urban mobility device system means a system which provides SUMDs for short-term rentals for point-to-point trips, which must be locked or secured to a stationary object. A SUMD that is not locked to would be dockless. So as far as the provisions of the rules that apply to bicycle behavior, like you can't ride a B-cycle on the sidewalk any more than you can ride a scooter on the sidewalk. But, which is, you can sometimes if you're outside of a business district, by the way. Like they should follow the same kind of rules of the road that the SUMD systems do. But obviously the provisions of the regulations that address the systems as regulated are different. They are more about the relationship they have with their customers, the education that they give their customers, that kind of stuff is many of the things that these rules address.
All I know about it is what it was in the press release that they're bringing 300 bikes. And I understand what you're saying, but we don't have any authority over them, so what they do is what they do. They're a private entity.
I believe you do have some authority over them in terms of, like I said, the rules of the road type regulations do
Over
apply.
B-cycle?
Yes, I think they do apply to B-cycle.
Really?
Yes,
Our authority or Metro's authority?
both.
Really? They're going to be surprised to hear that, I think. So I may make a motion. The numbers you gave for bicycles are minimums, right? That's under the shall.
Yes, they could. No, they would. It's a minimum and a maximum. So I mean, the number you award is all they can have until we adopt the fleet expansion provisions. That will probably be considered in July, because increasing any kind of SUMD in their fleet will be subject to those regulations.
Okay, so I could make a motion to allow them to bring more
You could.
after, okay.
You can increase, like whatever the initial award is, you can change what the initial, well, okay, the 500 is the.
Which initial award?
I'm sorry, the 500 is the initial award, and then we put in this regulation 080B
Okay.
that within the first 3 months, they would also be allowed to bring in this number of bicycles right off the bat.
Okay.
So they can do that, I guess, whenever within the 3-month period they want to. They can do it on the second day, or they can do it on the 90th day.
Okay.
So, but we assumed that you all wanted them out there pretty promptly. If you want to increase those numbers and make some of them mandatory and some of them optional, I think you could do that today.
Okay, I want to make that motion to, since we're requiring these numbers, I would like to say that Bird and Spin can go up to the same 125 that Lime has. And that's voluntary on their part, okay? We're not saying they have to, but we're allowing them to do that as part of the initial motion. So and I'm amending the motion trying to amend it. Does that make sense? Was that clear?
I think you seconded the motion. I don't think you.
No, I seconded the original motion. I'm moving an amendment to that motion.
All right, so if I understand correctly,
So he needs a second for his.
are
amendment.
you proposing to award an initial fleet size of 500 scooters each, and that each of the three operators shall offer the number of bikes at the ratios they proposed in response to the RFP, but with respect to bird and spin, allowing them to increase their number of bikes from the ordered amount up to 125?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for stating that. So can I get a second?
Do we have a second?
Just for clarification purposes, only 2 of the vendors that we made the award are given this shall increase, not,
No, all three.
All three of them, it's just at different
Lime-
numbers.
Lime is
125.
gonna have to put 125 on the street, bird 63, and spin 50.
right. But we are adding a shall to the 2 that are not at the
No,
one.
adding a voluntary
Adding a
increase
may.
up to the amount that Lime is doing.
Oh, a may. Okay.
I'll second that motion. I would like to ask a question before we vote on it, though.
All right?
Lime's not here, right? So, but Bird and Spin are here. Your ratio was lower, setting 63 and 50. I don't know how those ratios were met and whether whether you could voluntarily increase to the same as Lime of putting 125 e-bikes out there, or non-powered, powered or non-powered bikes out there. Is that going to impact your decision on your contracts or anything?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure they've made some kind of economic decision on why they chose their ratio, and what Kerry is proposing is completely voluntary, so
Yeah.
if they decide it doesn't make business
That's
sense,
okay.
they're not gonna increase their number.
All right. Let's vote.
And so we have a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
May I read you all back
Yes.
the revised language of 080B, just to make sure we're all on the same page?
Yes.
Okay, so now I have, each operator shall be allowed to have an initial fleet of 500 scooters each. In addition to the 500 scooters, within 3 months of the date of the issuance of their certificate of public necessity and convenience, each operator shall offer to the public a number of powered or non-powered bicycles equivalent in number to the ratio of bikes to scooters that they propose to have in their response to the RFP. And then I'm adding comma, but with respect to bird and spin, they may increase their number of bikes and e-bikes to 125 each.
I think it's probably better to say, but with respect to bird and spin, they may increase the number of bikes to the ratio proposed by Lime.
Okay, we'll do that.
Or the total by line, we go, well, no, I guess that's still four.
It's still bikes.
I mean, 'cause,
You're right.
Just and also.
You're right.
How about to
way-
match the ratio proposed by
The
Lime?
ratio may change.
Well, the way I read it is, the ratio's been proposed in response to the RFP. That's not changing. It's set in
Exactly
stone.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So it won't change, I don't believe.
Right, yeah, the
Yeah,
ratio
the
won't change,
the
but the
RFP
number
response
of,
is a fixed
Right, the
document.
number
of units that are,
units.
of SUMDs on the road may change, and
Correct.
therefore the ratio, you're right, that's
Correct.
good language to change it to.
All right, now, let's move to the second bullet point under the agenda, the establishing annual certificate fees with the related, along with the related vehicle fees. That's section 070, Commissioners.
That's correct. And I mean, I think Billy and I maybe can give you a little bit of an explanation of how we came up with the numbers that we did. And with setting of fees, We're always very careful to make sure that the setting of the fees that we set are cost-based, because fees can only be cost-based. Fees cannot be revenue generators, or they could be determined to be an illegal tax. So we're not going to do an illegal tax. So we looked first at kind of their administrative needs and enforcement needs, and Billy did the budget, so I'll let him speak to that part.
We went through a very intense exercise with Metro Public Works Finance as well as the Metropolitan Government's Finance Department, looking at what we believed we would spend on this process. This included recommendations of hiring 2 people, vehicles, as well as how much time I spend, Ms. Stillman would spend, anyone in our office, our inspector would spend. It would also include any indirect costs that you normally wouldn't think about, but this is a process that basically has been tested with the state comptroller to make sure that even a portion of the electric bill or any of the things that cost us as a department. So it's all proportionate. I feel very comfortable that the folks who put it together, it makes sense. Again, it was certainly an exercise that took several weeks and a lot of time, and I think Mr. Rogers has been through some of those at the state over the years, so he is he has a content expertise on that, so he does understand it. This will still not capture all of it, but I think it's a reasonable place for us to look at. I also think that that the commission at some point may want to look back at this, because we've gone at this 2 or 3 different ways, and this was, after conversation with finance, this is I think their recommendation to go forward. So,
So we started with that cost figure of what the additional costs are anticipated to be, and we kind of worked backwards from that number. And like Billy said, they can actually justify more costs than these fees cover. But we felt like this covered the minimum necessary stuff that they really wanted to do. And so we did see the proposals to maybe consider doing a per ride fee instead of a per SUMD fee. It felt like maybe the math on that was just a little more complicated than it needed to be. I feel like you're regulating the devices, so why not have a per device fee? And we want to make sure that we're always able to do that math to justify those costs clearly, because of the importance of that from a legal perspective. And so when you do that, basically what we came up with, and I might have to pull up my calculator here to say this correctly, but what we came up, so that obviously you have 3 companies and you have a $10,000 a year certificate fee. So that's going to start out with $30,000 to begin with. And then you have 1,500 scooters times $141 each, and that gets you at $211,500,000. Plus the 30, that's $241,500,000. Then in addition to that, you have was it 238 bicycles?
Yes.
238 times 141 is about $33,000. So you get up to, I think, close to about a $275,000 figure, which which Billy says he can quite easily spend.
yes, it's all around the country. You can look at different plans and different how it's done. Some are just per day charges. There's a few that are per day charges. Some, most of them are per ride, I would say. But the companies, the one thing that the ordinance said is this was the council's intent was to establish a partnership. It was clear in their language, and it's clear, and we've taken that as a staff, and I think as a commission, is that we're trying to develop a partnership. They've recognized our startup, and they've at least said to me privately, and I think they've said to you today, that they're ready to go forward with this. Again, it is not a cheap fee. If you compare our fee to around the country, we're going to be on the higher side. There's some cities higher, but not a whole lot. By the same token, they also recognize Nashville is unique. We have some unique issues some of them don't have. We're going to be good stewards of the money. We're going to continue to evaluate it. We would also, again, be prepared to come back to the commission if times change and say, we think the fee structure may need to be revisited, because I can nearly promise you the companies are going to be coming back once you go through your deliberations about fleet size, they're going to want to talk about more, because it's my understanding, based on conversations as late as yesterday, we, in some cases, are having the highest per ride, per scooter of anybody in the country. Our numbers are higher than anybody else's per scooter. So again, if I get them back up, they'll start talking. But I have never been given a reason to doubt what they've told me in terms of their numbers. And I suspect there's a lot of people riding scooters in Nashville right now.
If I could say one thing, before the pandemic, I spoke with the Billy Fields of Austin. And he basically had the same, he had taxis and limos and scooters and bikes and a few mopeds. He had 15 staff. And I don't know what their fees were, but at that point, they had something like 10,000 scooters and a couple of thousand e-bikes.
And I will add that if the other two companies, Bird and Spin, do take advantage of the option that we just added into 080B to go up to the full 125 number of bikes within the first 3 months, they would have to pay $141 each for each of those additional bikes as well.
Well, I buy us another truck.
Gosh, I don't know if I have that number directly in front of me, but we'll figure it out.
Well, I like the idea of a set fee based upon, getting the certificate and the number of units versus the uncertainty of a fee based upon per ride. I think it'll be easier for you to set a fiscal budget for your office.
Would anyone like to make a motion regarding a fee amount for the annual certificate and the vehicle fees?
Well, my green light's on. I'll make a motion that we approve the language in section 070 subsection A as written on fees.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. All right, and we've already addressed the initial fleet size, which is the third bullet point on our agenda. Now, we should consider the SUMD operational hours. Presently, the hours of operation are limited to where they are not permitted beyond the hours of 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. the next day. And the red line language, there's suggestion to make an exception for bicycles and e-bikes as defined in section 080B.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, you had asked for, or Mr. McNally had asked for some specific information about two cities. It has been shipped to me. I've not been up here just texting for fun. I've been advised by Bird that Charlotte's hours are 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and that Louisville's hours are 6 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Well, we're kind of halfway between Louisville and Charlotte in some ways. Maybe it's 10:30 for us, huh? I'm going by a geographical rationalization rather than a logical one here. Well, when we looked at this, the problem that we were facing was the reality that intoxicated people were getting on the scooters around 10 o'clock or after 10 o'clock, later in the evenings as the bars closed as well. And I recognize we're balancing that against probably servers and other people who are working downtown who are wanting to get to their car on a scooter or get home on a scooter. We've been given some information from the companies that we are not seeing the accidents that we had thought we were needing to prevent for the hours shortly thereafter 9 o'clock. I'm just going to propose that, I said it kind of jovially at about 10:30, but what do y'all think about 10:30? We're charging them a lot of money to operate here. And I think if we can give them a little more time on the back end when the scooters will be used, they'll be able to recoup some of that expense. Plus, I have heard from other folks that people who are getting off that shift at the restaurant or at a bar around 10:30 do like to have the option of grabbing a scooter and moving a little quicker back to their vehicle or back to East Nashville or somewhere to home.
I wrote down midnight. I was going to suggest midnight. How about 11?
Well, I don't get to vote, but I disagree. I like keeping it at 9. I think that there's a reason why we haven't seen accidents involving drunken scooter riders in a while, and it's largely because we've prevented them from being able to be used.
And I understand what you're saying. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, former Metro employee who used to deal with transportation issues, and he made the point, are scooters transportation? And if they are, then, that's what we need to look at them as transportation rather than an amenity. And I'd say the same thing about greenways. Are they part of the transportation system? It's not really up to us, I don't think, to decide that. In a way, council's already decided it. In any of the bills that council passed, did they have hours of operation? Or is that strictly in our rules?
At this point, it is strictly in your rules. Mr. Reed, I believe, mentioned the language of BL 2019-1658. I think that was actually substitute ordinance BL 2019-1658. And that did have a reference to 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends. And that was superseded by BL 2019-109. So that code provision was completely deleted and replaced. So that 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. language is no longer in section 1262.020 of the Metro Code. So that means that it is entirely up to this commission.
Basically, what council did was delete everything in the ordinance that had to do with regulation. And we put...
They replaced 020. They kept 010.
Exactly, the definitions. And basically, everything we had put in the rules is what was in the previous ordinances. So they basically deleted everything and said, it's up to you.
Yes.
Is that, yeah?
More or less, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that was the legislative intent, that we make the decision, that they refused to do so, if you want to put it that way.
And I feel like another concern, and I think a consideration we had back when we put these limited hours of operation in place is it wasn't just the concern of the rider or the driver of the SUMD who may be driving it under the influence, but actually increasing risk overall for all drivers downtown. I mean, it's already a higher stress situation driving downtown on a weekend night in your car completely sober, and then to add the element of scooters, well into the evening hours, you're increasing risk all around for there to be an accident.
We're going to get into a discussion of transportation policy. See, my point of view would be there are too many cars. And the car driver already has a legal responsibility to exercise due care, regardless of how many scooters
Except
there
you
are.
don't have scooters driving where they're supposed to be driving or obeying traffic laws.
But we're expecting them to do so.
Yes, we
I
are.
understand, and hopefully we'll have somebody in a truck out regulating them. And again, it gets back to the question, and it's probably not our role to say, but are they part of the transportation system? And I'll admit, the rule, I wanted the rule to be different for e-bikes, because I want all e-bikes to be equal, and I can ride mine 24/7. And that's why I put it in there. So maybe the people who are coming out of bars can get an e-bike and not a scooter. And I hope the people who rent e-bikes will be more responsible than the ones who rent scooters. I don't know if that's That's speculation on my part.
If I
There
could make
is
a com-
actually, sorry, a point of interest, there is actually an existing Attorney General opinion that says riding an e-bike under the influence of alcohol is a DUI.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may add, and one of the things that we have, that has been a part of the general conversations from a policy standpoint, is the whole issue of transportation. One of the things we'd like to believe is, while it's not going to solve all of the problems, is that the SUMDs, the scooters, and I guess the e-bikes as well, would be that first and last mile of a person's trip. In other words, from the bus station or where they're out to get to their home, and from their home back to the bus station. So I think Nashville, it's such a unique situation. I'm not saying they don't have entertainment in other cities. I'm not saying Austin doesn't have music. I'm not sure they have the most live music in America, but we'll let them fight with somebody else on that. I'd invite them on the 4th of July to come to Nashville. But anyway, what I would say is we have this unique situation where we have transportation and entertainment. We have experience with both over the last few years, but what I'm hoping we're going to be able to see, and one of the things I just spoke yesterday with one of the companies when we're talking about data collection, is I want to be able to get a better understanding about what is transportation, what are being used for specific transportation needs. For instance, if I live in Germantown, they're not going to track me personally, but I'm going to know there's X number of rides coming from Germantown at, say, between 6 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., and they're terminating in the downtown area. I have to assume they're not coming down here for breakfast. They could be, but I'm assuming they're coming to work. And the same thing in the afternoon. Conversely, they're going to be going back out in the afternoons. And if we can start looking at those numbers on both ends, and y'all know what a data guru I am, we're going to be able to, I think, make some inferences. The other side of that is the companies themselves, because they have the full sets of data that we don't necessarily, in terms of being able to make inferences, I think we're going to be able to depend on them to come back and make certain inferences that this is what we believe is transportation and this is what we believe is recreational or entertainment. So, again, I'm not saying increase curfews, not increase curfews. I think we have to be, let's look at what the data says and what we know, and y'all will need to make a decision.
My
hope that
comment was
helps.
going to be along your lines. Being in transportation and actually owning entertainment at one point in downtown Nashville and still being connected to that, I would say that as a board, part of our mandate is public necessity. Those employees, those people working downtown, living downtown, to see the necessity of them being able to use those SUMDs along with, as you stated, the safety guidelines, and that I do believe part of what we saw in a decrease of incidents and or accidents was due to that 9 o'clock curfew. However, playing back onto the public need and necessity part of it, I do believe there is a point of a slight increase in that having owned some nightclubs on 2nd Avenue, I can tell you I don't know of a large number of people who even are stumbling onto the streets at 10. They're probably just starting. Most of the events are not letting out during the 9 o'clock curfew hour, being it be a hockey event, a football event. I would say the 10:30 curfew would still place us in the area of necessity and still keep us in the area of safety as well. That would just be my interjection into a possible move of the curfew.
Commissioner Carr, you're forgetting about the pre-game warm-ups before people go out at 10 o'clock, but
Well, that's a tailgate, and that goes back to Metro because they're in a car.
So you're trying to amend my motion? Didn't I make a motion for 5 to 11?
No, there
I
wasn't.
intended
No.
to. Okay. I thought I made okay.
You made a suggestion, but.
Okay.
I
Well-
would say 1030 would be a balancing act. And again, as Mr. Field said, we will later have data moving that curfew or leaving it to say we're tracking our SUMDs. And he's right. You know, we will be able to tell from that data if these rides are visitors to our town or our patrons who live here. So, but I wouldn't see, again, giving some take and give with the amount of money that we are charging the companies to move that curfew to 10:30. That would actually be my suggestion. Of course, I can't make that move alone.
And remember, you will be getting anonymized and aggregated data. I don't know whether it is actually possible for Populous to break out whether specific, or for the companies to break, well, Mr. Reed is saying yes, they can. So they can tell you whether they're locals or not, I guess.
Will you be able to tell us if it's bicycles or scooters? Absolutely. Okay. Okay, I'll make the motion. How's that? I was going to do 11. I'll do 10:30. We amend section L to change 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m.
And to add the language about bicycles and electric
Yeah.
bicycles.
Oh, I have to do it. Yes, and to leave the rest of it as proposed.
And
That's,
why are we wanting an exception for e-bikes and
My
bicycles?
basic philosophical principle is that all e-bikes are equal and they should be treated like bicycles. And I understand this is different, but do we have a time limit on taxis or limousines or when do pedal taverns end?
The only ones we have. I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers, we have operational exceptions for pedal carriages, pedicabs they can't be on the street from 7 to 9.
Right.
And then from 5 until 7. We don't actually have a ending time for any of them. They typically do. Doesn't mean you can't, it just means
Right.
we don't
We
currently.
don't require it. And so I'm going to argue that bike riders will be more responsible than scooter riders. And here's the reason. I think all the bikes they're bringing are what's called Class 1 bikes. They're pedal assist. And they don't go until you start pedaling. And so I think most of the people that you're concerned about are going to get on a scooter if they can. And they might not be able to get on a bike and make it go. So we're really talking about two separate technologies here. And so that's, I mean, essentially, you know, I can ride my bike 24/7, and so
Well,
that's why.
can't you own a scooter?
Oh, sure.
You can,
Yeah,
and you could
yeah.
ride that 24/7.
Yeah,
Yeah, you could ride that 24/7, so
I don't care about the
all
scooters.
scooters are equal.
Well,
Logic doesn't
okay.
really carry.
E-bikes are in state law. Okay, scooters are not, except I think for our ability to regulate them. So e-bikes have a different legal as well as practical standard that's different from scooters. I don't think state law says I can ride mine 24/7, but basically it allows that. And quite frankly, our ability to regulate e-bikes, I think, is affected by that particular state law. But that's not for today. It's, by the way, for attorneys, it's 55-8-306. You might want to get a chance to read that before the next meeting. So that's, and it gets back to the whole thing about transportation. Are scooters and e-bikes and bicycles and whatever part of the transportation system in Nashville? And if you go by, read the bike ped plan, which we're supposed to be operating under in Nashville, you know, the goal is to increase the number of alternative mode share and lessen car share, which I'm not sure we'll ever do that. And as a matter of fact, that bike ped plan, I noticed in the budget, is up for renewal or for new changes. So when that happens, we need to include scooters in our bike ped scooter plan, I guess. So that's my reasoning about treating bicycles and e-bikes different from scooters. I think they're already treated differently in the law and in reality. I mean, they're different.
So part of your reasoning is that an impaired driver is less likely to use a bicycle, even one that's electric, as opposed to an SUMD.
Right, yes.
So they're all
And-
SUVs.
I'm sorry, as opposed to a scooter.
Yes. Yes, and the thing about it is, I've only ridden one of the bikes they've got. They're really heavy. They're even heavier. All e-bikes are at least twice as heavy as a regular bicycle. So it's not just a matter of, if I got on one of their e-bikes, it's probably 300 pounds I'm going to have to move. So it's not, and the motor doesn't kick in till you've pedaled a few feet or more than a few, depending on, what their model is like. So, yeah, that's my basic stance, is that the e-bikes are different than the scooters. As far as I'm concerned, we can ban the scooters and allow e-bikes, but it's different motion.
So, number-wise, what we're talking about is extending the curfew on 1,500 scooters and accepting out of that 200, at least right now, 238 bikes,
Correct.
with the possibility of it being 375 bikes. Okay.
And we're going to make all of these subject to maximum numbers in certain areas, i.e. Broadway, Lower Broad, correct?
I believe that's one of the issues that the commission can deal with in terms of various areas. The very first ordinance that was passed by the Metro Council actually dealt with square miles in terms
Yeah,
of.
I think that's still in here somewhere.
That's what I was thinking.
This has been one of the more challenging, in 33 years, this has been one of the more challenging things to operate, because we're going to be operating scooters under ordinance, under rules, under contract, and RFP proposals, all four. So we're having to, we're moving from this one to this one to this one, trying to make sure that we're following the rules. And it's certainly a juggling act, but Ms. Costonis has continued to press
Well,
us.
I was a bureaucrat for 30 years, and of course, we love to make rules, but I don't ever remember having to deal with that many different things. Usually you have a statute, and then you make a rule, and that's the end of it.
Yep.
So my point is, we can control the number of SUMDs, both bicycles and scooters, in certain areas of town. And since
It may be, is it where they're parked, though? Like, in terms of the,
I think it was a gathering of the scooters. It was one of those kind of, it was what the original was. So again, this is something, one of the things I hope we walk out here with is the vendors, or our partner operators are now, are hearing your concerns and your issues. My guess is when we have our next meeting, these are going to be the kind of things we're going to be talking about, to address your concerns and your needs, and the part of what we're expecting is innovation. We're also going to be asking, we're expecting pilot programs where they're going to come back and say, hey, we want to try this. What do you think? So,
yeah, in other cities, I know what some of the bike sharing, and I think some of the scooter companies did, was reduce fees for first-line, front-line workers. And so in other places, we shut down B-Cycle. In other places, the usage increased significantly. So, and also in terms of telling them where their machines are going to be, that gets into the whole equity element about not just where they can't be, but where they have to be offered.
They've all committed to equity. So we're going to be working on that and understanding what we think that means, and where we think that, working through those issues, I guess is a good way to put it.
okay, I found the provision that you are referring to. I think it is in 080D. It says the MTLC shall establish regulations, requirements, and limitations to reduce clustering of SUMDs until the MTLC establishes such regulations, requirements, and limitations. All permitted operators shall have systems with service areas that do not exceed 340 of each type of SUMD per square mile. The MTLC shall designate the location of the square mile locations in relation to the service areas. So that is currently in your regulations.
All right.
Practically speaking, I think it would pertain to where they put them out,
Right.
not necessarily where people drop
They end
them.
up, sure.
All right, so we have a motion pending from Mr. Rogers. Is there a second?
I'm honestly going to have to say, I need you to repeat the motion.
You wanted 10:30.
Yeah, but we have gone
I understand.
down the creek and up the river.
Let me read what I'm moving here. Operation of SUMDs is prohibited after 10:30 p.m. and before 5 a.m. except for bicycles and electric bicycles as defined below in section 080B.
Which does refer to the class 1 that you were talking
Right.
about.
Kinda. I know your e-bike horse, but I'm with you on the bicycle thing, but not so much. I think for me, I've ridden an e-bike. There's a shop in 12 South that sells them as well. I don't want to open the options per se that if I'm inebriated and the scooter won't work, I'm going to try the bike.
Would you prefer them on the bike or in a car?
Neither.
Well, those are the choices. Or Lyft or Uber, I guess.
Well, the Lyft or Uber, but
Or a taxi cab.
yeah, or a taxi.
Or a taxi.
Thank you.
Or
We still have
taxi.
some?
I don't, I don't, it's would you prefer them on a horse or a plane? This is still, if they're able to get it going, it's still motorized. And they no longer have to keep it going.
Mr. Carter, to your point, one of the things that the companies have been working on and already have in place are particular things that people have to do in order to make them start. And one of the things is, they would have to explain it, but we could certainly get you a demonstration of it, is there are certain exercises they have to go through in order to enable it. In other words, answering questions and things about that should help, at least in part, show conditions. The condition they may or may not be in to operate the bike. So DUI, driving under the influence, is something the companies continue to work on. As the technology gets better, I think there'll be more tools that they're going to be able to use. I take what you're saying. I understand it. They've heard it, and we'll add that to our conversations about the whole education issue related to operations of scooters and all SUMDs.
I'll second the motion.
All right, I'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. I do think there's enough of a distinction, Mr. Carr, based on Mr. Rogers' explanation as to why e-bikes and bikes are, accepted. I wanted to flesh that out because I certainly don't want to open ourselves up for arbitrarily excluding one versus another with these limited hours of operation, because I'm well aware of the standard that we need to uphold to make sure that our rulemaking is not arbitrary. So
I don't know what D-Cycle's going to do. I don't know if they operate 24/7 or not. I don't remember, so.
We need to address M3.
talking about the data sharing?
No, the no ride zone.
Yes, Billy and I
Yes.
were just talking about that in terms of if there are ones that you don't want to debate specifically, if you could maybe just make a motion at the end of the meeting to adopt all the other changes. If you think they're non-controversial and stylistic, then we could go ahead and have those incorporated. That one is probably not stylistic, though. M3 is probably more, like I said, it kind of allows you all to be flexible around whatever flexibility Parks determines to adopt, so.
Well, I would make a motion that we adopt the language of 050M subsection 3 to read, to read as it is printed in front of us now.
And the other one that's maybe not just stylistic are the amendments to 060, the data sharing.
Yeah. Why don't we take M3 first?
I don't like it, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna try and change it today, but,
Well, let's vote on it one way or the other today.
I understand. I mean, actually,
I guess
we
the
could
way-
leave the language as it stands, right?
Well, I think the way the language, the way it's being proposed to be changed, we're deferring to Board of Parks and Recs.
Right, and
And so if there's an issue
Yeah.
with what they decide, the state wants to come in and say you can't do that, then.
So I think
Well,
the
it's not-
amendment would make it more flexible. So like if parks were to decide to allow to have them, like if we didn't change it, our rule would still ban it. But if they make their change, then our change will follow their change.
I won't get into it, but the applicable statute is 558306. And my argument is they don't have authority over it, so that's all I'll say about it.
We have discussed that, and
Oh,
I
we
have suggested that it be
And I
a
apologize for
discussion
the
for
way
the
I
Parks
discussed
Board.
it before.
Was there a second on the proposed language from Mr. McNally? That is to keep it.
Motion fails.
Was that a question?
Yes, that was a question.
Oh.
Was that to keep it as the red line in M3?
Yes, as proposed by.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Pass.
Pass, all right. Do we have a quorum with an abstention?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. All right, and we do need to take up all the other remaining suggested changes, including the data sharing
Correct.
changes. These are less controversial in terms of, or maybe controversial is too strong a word, less room for debate amongst reasoned people.
Could I ask you a question? Isn't there some kind of standard software package they're using in other cities for data collection?
We do have a vendor called Populous that is aggregating and anonymizing the data. The operators provide the data to Populous. Populous as Metro's vendor, then
Okay.
we'll aggregate and anonymize that data to address privacy concerns. And then I think that data can be like grouped in all different kinds of useful percentages, or, I mean, Mr. Speak and may be able to explain that better than I can, but I think that they can use that, manipulate that data to give you all kinds of different answers to questions that you have, but everything that you would get would be through that vendor and would be anonymized and aggregated.
Well, I'll make a motion that we adopt the revisions in section 060 subparagraph A regarding the data sharing.
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Just for clarity, do you want to address the deletions of B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K,
Yes.
all through M?
Yeah, I apologize. I should have added just the revisions to all of section 060. But I would make a motion that we adopt the deletions of section 060B through M as proposed.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I'll take an attempt to make a motion on the stylistic changes. I think there's 3 that I've noted here.
There's one more, Mr. McNally. It's
And I have one issue question too.
section 080, the section title needs to be bolded.
It does.
It looks like section 110 is, section,
Needs to be voted.
yeah,
Okay.
and section 100 and section 110 as well.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers, you said you had one other issue you want to go ahead and address that?
Yeah. On 0303, if I remember correctly, some or all of the proposals included a sit-down scooter, which sounds to me like a better idea than a stand-up scooter, but again, our council can explain it to me. We have in here a sentence that says an electric scooter shall have a footboard for the user to stand up on and no seat. So I was wondering if that means they couldn't bring a sit-down scooter to Nashville.
For now, I think that probably would be the case.
Okay, can we change it to allow them? Or,
Theoretically, we're supposed to propose changes 2 weeks prior to the meeting so that they
Okay.
have a chance to respond to it. If they don't care, and I believe we only have one representative left, then it may not matter, but I think it would probably be better to take that up at a later date, just so that everybody would have time to be aware that it was going to be addressed. And
but it would be voluntary. I mean, they don't have to bring a sit-down
Sure.
scooter, but, okay. Well, so we could do that next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to see them less, I want to see them more.
There was one other thing I was asked a question about section 080E. I don't know who that question was from, but the issue was about equity, and we asked that the scooters be distributed to socioeconomically disadvantaged parts of the city, as well as other parts of the city where they tend to be maybe disproportionately distributed. And it only kicks in at the threshold of 1,000 scooters, and nobody right now has 1,000 scooters. So that provision right now would currently not be applicable. So another, whoever brought that up, another future rule change might be to maybe consider making that threshold down to 500, or, I don't know what was contemplated exactly, but I wanted to address the question.
Okay.
But again, like anything that we didn't have on the red line, we probably should put off for a couple weeks in order to, or not a couple weeks, until a future meeting, and so that we would have time to make the suggested change 2 weeks before that meeting, and they would have a chance to respond.
Well, I would hope we do that. Consider that at the next meeting.
Mr. Chaplain, if any of the commissioners have specific rules they'd like to have considered, if you'd let us know, we'll work on our end of it to craft them and get them back to you for you to see if this is what you intended. I think the same way as the public, it's a little different with the public from the standpoint, but we certainly are open to ideas and thoughts of what we're doing. So please just let us know, and we'll also have it as part of our agendas with the companies. So thank you.
Because they promised a lot of things on those proposals.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion on the remaining changes that have been proposed by Metro Legal as far as updating the regulations for shared urban mobility devices?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the revisions in section 020, the preamble that was striking out that language, and also subsection 3, which struck out the word new, that we also adopt the proposals in 025, the changes to that particular paragraph, and finally in 030J, we adopt the proposal to remove the word substitute. I think these are all stylistic, and it would clean up the regulation to be consistent with the purpose and policy behind it.
And then the bolding in section 080, 100, and 110.
And I would include to bold the captions in 080, 0110, and 0100.
Second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. That concludes our addressing of shared urban mobility devices and the regulations. Now we have another public hearing. This was regard to booting services. There's a company application for parking authority. Mr. Fields?
Booting services required a public hearing. Ms. Smith is here. The application has been reviewed. There were, I think the only thing that's going to be left, there are some of our documents are going to have to be reviewed, are going to be modified to meet what we need, as well as we'll have to inspect the lot. But otherwise, it's ready for your consideration, and we think it's compliant. It will end up, in other words, once we complete that, everything will be compliant.
All right. Is there anyone who has requested to speak with regard to the application?
No, sir.
At this point in time, we'll close the public hearing and consider the application.
Are we considering the application prior to the inspection?
Normally, it's not necessarily unusual. What'll happen is, the real inspection are the sign, are two signs. So assuming you approve it, if we go out and the signs aren't there, we'll say put the signs up. Once the signs are up, then we approve it. So the content of the application is compliant. The only thing that we've not seen the final product on are, for instance, the notifications that go on the window. It'd be my advice and my belief to the commission is it'd be inappropriate for me to say, okay, we want to see all your paperwork. If they were to produce all their documents and then you deny it, then they've spent money and there's not a whole lot of use for something, say for some sort of a notice on a car saying, we're going to boot you. So if you approve it, then what we will do is go back and before a certificate, before any documents will be issued to her to allow her to operate, we would review the parking lot. We would finish the parking lot review. I think it may have had an initial one. I don't know that, but certainly we would then look at all of her paperwork in terms of notifications, the notification that's actually stuck on the window, as well as the signage and that sort of thing. We are one inspector short. We're actually two staffers short right now, so we're working at it.
I just asked because I know this booting issue is a hot topic as far as notification that I was going to get booted in this area, who I should call, what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
Is this a one-employee operation?
Ms. Smith is present if you'd like to ask a question.
Well, under the list of employees, she's the only name.
And at this point, you're just proposing one lot as well,
Yes,
correct?
exactly, yeah.
Okay, just one. Oh,
It's just one location at the moment. I mean, I do have several other people that have contacted me, but I have told them that I'm going through this process, and so they want to hold off and wait to do anything. I do have this one client that has wanted it yesterday.
Well, I make a motion to approve Parking Authority's application for booting services as a booting services company.
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is under wrecker and towing services. We have a driver application for Mario Brannon.
Mr. Brandon is present. He also has a representative from West Nashville to respond where he would be working. Your application actually shows him work for TowPro. He had made a change in where he wanted to work that would go.
Well, I'm sorry.
It was my impression he wanted to, rather than work at TowPro, he wanted to work at West Nashville.
Yeah, when I put in the application, that was the job at first I was gonna go to, and then I decided to go to West Nashville.
And in reviewing reviewing everything, there were some charges, including an assault or domestic assault in 2020 that I thought needed to be brought to attention. It was dismissed. It was actually dismissed this year. So based on our previous meetings, you'd like to see him. So he's here to answer any questions you might have.
What was the reason for the change?
The job change?
Yeah.
When I went to TOPRO to put in my application, when I went down to get my my license, I had to do the application fee, and then that's when all this came about. And then I still had that court date to go to, and they told me to come back once it was dismissed. So in the process of me going to the court date, I saw West Nashville record, and I liked it everything they had going. So I decided to try to make a career with them. And then my court date everything had got dismissed and expunged. So
You just felt like that was a better fit for you.
yes, sir.
The assault charge on June of 2020, what was that about?
It was an argument, but like I say, the case got dismissed. What happened was, I actually called Metro so I can leave the house, but they actually took me down and for something that I didn't do. So when court came about, everything got dismissed and threw out because the lady came and told her that I never put my hands on her, which I didn't. So they felt like they had to take me, and all this was just a big mix-up. So I had to go through the process of getting it dismissed and expunged.
Well, what relationship are you to Derica Lynette Mayo Roper?
She was my girlfriend at the time.
All right, and you've seen the warrant charging you with domestic assault, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, you read it?
Yes, sir.
All right, you know that the police officer did an investigation when they arrived at the scene, right?
Yes, sir.
In fact, they didn't find a bottle of wine that was supposedly used as a weapon.
Yes.
But they did interview the kids that were there, right?
Right.
And you're aware that the officer reported that both kids stated they saw you push Miss Roper on the bed and then stated they saw you swing at her.
Right, and which that all was a lie. So she showed up at court. I never put my hands on her.
How old are the kids?
Kids are 13.
And initially, she made a statement to the police that you had pushed her on the bed after she asked you to get up so you could go to use the car to go get some food.
No, she never told the officer that at all. She actually was telling the officer, she was wondering why they was handcuffing me, and she never told them that I touched her, which I didn't.
So did Officer Brian Quinley lie in this affidavit?
Yeah, he did. Because once court came about, everything got dismissed and expunged. I never put my hands on her. Never touched her.
Because
The
she came to
kids-
court and said you didn't touch her.
I mean, right, but still the kids, they lied on me, and I never put my hands on her.
Now, I had an opportunity to look at your criminal record that was provided to us by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations. You got a long history here, right?
I mean, it's not long. I mean, a couple of tickets and stuff back in the day and different things like that.
Okay, you've got a theft charge, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then you had a case that was put on judicial diversion, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What are, other than the tickets, what are the more serious charges you have against you in here?
Nothing. I just had a theft charge and that assault. That's all I had. And like I said, a lot of tickets was like just driving. My younger days, driving no license.
Did they ever find you in violation of your probation on the theft charge?
I had a violation, but it was concurred, deferred.
But what was and why was there a claim by the probation officer that you had violated probation?
I was on vacation, went on vacation, and I failed to notify her, and which it all got straightened out. I had never had a violation the whole time I was on there, and went on vacation, and just, like I say, forgot to let her know that I was going out of town, so she violated me.
Thank you, sir.
if I may. From a company standpoint, you're prepared to put Mr. Brandon to work and
Absolutely. I mean, if we can sit here and give chances every day, I mean, people deserve second chances a lot. And people can make a change. If you can change, I can change, I'm sure he can change. He's just trying to better his life and go into other directions and better himself. And with the opportunities and I think you make a great candidate for what he's looking to do at this job. Mentally, physically, emotionally. I believe we can help him.
Are you concerned that he's previously been charged, I'm not saying convicted, it was dismissed, but charged with a domestic assault in a heated argument? And in the business of towing, frequently there can be heated arguments.
No.
You're not concerned for hiring him?
No.
Okay.
Various reasons due to the nature of, from the history that I've worked in other line of work before. I've worked as a heavy wrecker operator, questioning, talking to individuals in an officer's point of view, listening to affidavits, and also reading them and speaking to the victims of the domestic. People have a tendency, let's just say, for an example, I had a woman turn around and say, well, I just said that so that way I knew where he was at because I thought he was messing around with his other baby mama. So people do tend to make up stories. And unfortunately, he went to court, went through the process, just like he's going through this process here for a job. He did his processing, went through it. They dismissed the case after they found out there was nothing to hold him against it. And in this case, most of the time we're really not dealing with people that are upset. They're looking for our help in towing. We provide a professional service to them, courtesy, and we come with, they have problems, we come with solutions, and we're there to help them. And they're happy to see us when their car, truck, semi-truck, or anything is broke down, and they're happy to see us to help them get them out of that situation. So we're taking them out of a predicament. So I don't see how they're, I mean, repossessing cars, we don't do. That might be a problem, but we don't do that. We're not in the repossession business.
Thank you. Well, I'll make a motion to approve Mario Brandon's application, driver application for wrecker and towing service.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Next, we'll take an item out of order. Jay Sanders with Magic Trolley has asked to speak.
I wasn't on the docket, but I had a conversation with Mr. Carr first, who told me about the meeting today, and so I had about 30 minutes to get from Murfreesboro to here. I didn't realize that it would be such a long meeting. I could have waited to come. I could have changed clothes, right? I spoke with Mr. Fields, and if you would, Mr. Fields, will you kind of...
He had, before the meeting, he had asked the question, he wanted to apply or talk about applications for a party bus. I explained to him that the state of Tennessee does not allow metropolitan government or any other municipality in Tennessee to regulate any vehicle that carries more than 14 passengers and a driver, as well as anything that weighs 10,000 pounds and 10,001 pound. So there's no regulation that the city has other than the normal rules of the road, vehicle standards. In other words, police can, those sort of things. But in terms of insurance, background checks, inspections, so forth, we have zero authority over that. And I explained that to him. And he asked to just speak to you, so I passed it to the chair.
So I'm a school bus contractor for Rutherford County Schools. So I own school buses that take children to school every day. And now, for the first time, we're busing children to summer school thanks to the pandemic. So as we retire buses, these buses are inspected yearly by the Tennessee Highway Patrol. And then we go into extended use, and they're inspected twice. So our buses are tip-top, or they're not allowed on the road. These are 90-passenger buses, and I had kind of brought a picture for you. My bus weighs 36,200 pounds, and it is a 90-passenger. And I just wanted to clarify and go on record that you do not have the authority to regulate me in this situation, but I wanted to do my due diligence and come before you and find out what was required. But I wanted to come on record just to make sure that that's clarified.
I have no more clarification. Same.
That's the same, but I got to hear them. That's why I'm here.
They don't have any authority.
They
to tell
don't?
you
Good.
Yeah.
We're good. Thank you.
That's
Appreciate your
what
time.
I started.
I know, I just wanted to make sure everybody, especially them,
There
got
are
this.
requirements in state law, but I can't advise you about that,
Right.
but you should seek your own legal advice
Yes,
to make
ma'am.
sure you comply with that.
Yes, ma'am, we're insured and inspected. Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is under horse-drawn carriages. We have a driver application for Holly Buckley. Mr. Fields?
In making the application, Ms. Buckley failed to disclose some items on her background. Nothing in here would preclude her from being a driver or disqualify her from being a driver. We just wanted to, as you have instructed, when someone leaves issues off along these lines, they need to come to the commission.
Ms. Buckley, what was left off your application?
I forgot to list, the public intoxication that happened like 10 years ago when I was like 18 years old. I was just like 18 and wild like any 18-year-old. And it was, one of the police officers, actually put like, not in right container because I had Tylenol, and I got them from one of my friends because I was like in a car accident and I did like have no pain medication at home, so she gave me some like little ibuprofens, and well, long story short, like the police officer locked me up because of that.
How many different citations do you have?
There was like multiple public intoxications and like nothing like hardcore, like no violent crimes or nothing like that. It's just like minor stuff.
The DUI?
No, I've never drunk and drive.
What is there's a charge
There's a
for
felony charge.
terroristic threatening. What was that about?
Yeah, the terroristic threatening, I can't remember what I said to the judge, but it was the night after I had to, I was at a party with some friends, and we were like drinking all night, and I forgot all about the court date the next day, and I went to court and I was still, intoxicated. And apparently, I think I didn't like the outcome that the judge said, so I said something out of line, but I honestly cannot remember what I said. But I didn't say it to the judge. I was walking past some guy outside the courtroom, and he was like in just khaki shorts and a tank top and wound up being like an undercover cop.
So, why did you not disclose all of these charges on your application initially?
Oh, yeah, the first application that I went to, the TLC building off the street off of Trinity, and the woman actually tore the page off at first because she handed me the top page, and she handed me and told me to fill it out, and she took the back page off, and I couldn't write anything down. And she wasn't like explaining to me, like how to do everything, so I didn't even understand basically like how to fill everything out.
Did you, I have your application in front of me, and then someone wrote none, where it asks you to list each violation of federal, state, or local law with which you have ever been charged or arrested, convicted, or not or not, and all expunges must be listed. Did you write none?
I think I did write that because I didn't understand that I was supposed to list it on that page. And the woman, like, she was like, you know, like talking like really, really fast, and like I was trying to understand what she was saying, and like I literally just could not understand her.
Mr. Chairman, it appears what I think happened, I was in the building, but I wasn't at the window at that particular moment. It appears that, it would be referring to Millie, Carmen in our office, had taken the page, and in talking with Millie, she took the page, she was going to make a copy of it. And at that point, so because in her initial application, Miss Buckley failed to give us our, the folks, her references, so to speak. So a copy be made, we'd keep the original document and then give her the page back. And at some point between that action and her getting the copying back, there was some level of confusion.
Yes, she took the last page off because she told me that I had to take that home and get the references, and then she never like gave me back the last page. Like she tore it off and said she was gonna make a copy, but she never gave it back. So
Well, actually,
I
that's
don't
the one
remember.
you wrote none on, but I think,
Yeah.
but again, I think what happened, there was some confusion at that point, and I'm neither defending or supporting, I'm just commenting. She has since also given us her, her references, so it actually came in, just as this was going out, and I apologize for not including it, but we have made calls on to those folks.
What was the last date on these? All I see, I think, is 2012. Is that the last one? Is that the
yeah,
last one?
yeah, I was like 18 years old, and I think all of them were like expunged when I was 19. So that would be like 2012.
You may want to go back to the lawyer that said they'd be expunged, because they're still in the record.
They're still.
Ms. Buckley, did you think we just weren't going to catch these from 2012 in Jefferson County, Kentucky?
No.
That's why you wrote none down there?
No.
Because I'm having a hard time accepting that you would actually write the word none and have this lengthy of a record from 2011 through 2012 and not remember a single one of them. It makes more sense to me that you thought, hey, they won't catch it here in Nashville.
No, I knew that.
Or maybe you thought they were expunged and we wouldn't catch it.
I thought they were expunged because, like, I hired one of them attorneys that you pay like certain amount of money and they like expunge everything off your record, and I did that like maybe 4 years ago.
So is that why you wrote none? Because you thought
Yeah,
it was
I
expunged
wrote-
and we wouldn't catch it?
Yeah, I wrote none because I thought it was expunged because I paid like a lot of money to like an attorney to have my record expunged, but I guess he didn't expunge it. And
Well,
I
if you
paid
mo-
like $300 and something to have all the charges expunged.
Well, 2 minutes ago, when the chairperson asked you whether you wrote that word none down there, you said you wrote that down there because you didn't really understand that form.
I didn't understand that form, and I didn't understand like the whole process of the back page. I mean, I understood the front page because that's all your basic information. But I was trying to fill the references out too, and she told me I had to take that home. Like, she didn't explain to me pretty well the back page.
We aren't worried about the back page. We're worried about the second page regarding your criminal record that wasn't disclosed.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the second page. That's where the references are at too, on the back.
Did you write none? And I'm not trying to put ideas in her head here because I understand where you're going. But just listening to what she said, did you write none because you thought expunged meant nobody was going to see it?
No, I wrote the word none because I thought the word expunged means it would be taken off the record. Like, I would have no more criminal record. That's why I wrote the word none, because I thought like the word expunged meant gone.
Well, it does say you're supposed to list all
I don't-
expungements on the form.
Yeah, I thought I wrote that too. I guess I didn't. I just wrote like, all the things I was charged with.
Well, Ms. Buckley, most of the time when we are dealing with situations like this, it's, the applicant has listed a number of citations or arrests, and they leave one or two things off. We're dealing with a situation here where, notwithstanding that this was from 9 and 10 years ago, there are a number of arrests here on charges, and none of them were listed. In fact, you wrote none. You didn't
Yes.
leave it blank, you just actually wrote none.
Yes, I apologize for that. I wrote the word none because, like, I thought that expungement means, you know, like, no more, like, criminal history.
What was the controlled substance, the felony charge that you had? in
Yes, the controlled
2012?
substance was what I was telling you when my friend gave me some ibuprofen and she put it like in a little bitty bag. And I was walking home with it and I got stopped.
And the outcome of that case?
The outcome of that case is that charge was dismissed.
Okay. Well, from my look of these numerous misdemeanors, they're all alcohol related, they're disorderly conduct, they're trespassing. And despite the sound of terroristic threatening, it does say third degree, and I know in Kentucky that's the lowest level misdemeanor that there is. There's first, second, and third degree terroristic threatening. We wouldn't even be here if you just listed them.
Yes, I apologize for that. Like I thought just putting none like an expungement means you like everything will be taken off. So I guess that's not the case. I guess even if you have expunged, like they can still bring up your criminal history.
No, you're supposed to read the form that says list everything, including expunged offenses, and put them down. And if you can't remember them, then you put down, this is the best of my memory of what I've got. You don't write none.
Yes.
And my concern, the reason you're here and the reason we're asking you this is because you have raised an appearance of deception in your application, and we're concerned about entrusting you with driving a horse-drawn carriage, and following the rules and not deceiving us if something happens.
Yes. Yes, I've been following like the law, the rules ever since, you know, my last charge. I have 2 kids right now, so I mean, I don't break any rules or anything.
Well, you didn't follow the rules on your application.
Yeah,
And
that was like my misunderstanding. I apologize for that.
Mr. Fields, did everything else in the application look okay?
Yes, sir, I believe, and I've also spoken to Sugar Creek, and they're prepared to employ her if you approve it.
And Ms. Buckley, I apologize, I had to step out for a moment, but you have experience driving a carriage, operating carriage?
I have experience saddling horses, riding horses, and taking care of horses, yes.
I'll make a motion to approve Ms. Buckley's application for the horse-drawn carriages.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We also have some company applications under other passenger vehicles for hire. New company applications for Kairos Limo, Victory Ground LLC, We Love Nashville LLC, and Sam Alsaldi, DBA Sam Moss Rideshare.
They're all in order, and they're ready to go to work if you approve them.
I just want to clarify something before we go forward, since the gentleman here with the bus did mention that he called me. Don't know how he got my number, but he did call me, and he was here because I did tell him I cannot legally help you go forward. That if this is supposed to be on the street, you might need to contact the Highway Patrol Agency, especially if it's a bus. We do not regulate anything you are telling me, or you need to bring this to public discussion. So just
And-
wanted to clarify that.
Oh, and just I get that. One of the issues out there are several of the companies have come to us for regulation, and we've had to turn them away. So I think for him, they don't believe it. They really don't believe me when I tell them. And I say, I just don't have, I just don't have the authority to do it. So you mean you let those vehicles roll them up and down Broadway without any authority? I have no authority, nor can I give you advice other than contact the state of Tennessee, talk to a lawyer, and let them do the work.
Mr. Fields, let me assure you that I get the same comment from the public as well. You're on that commission. Why aren't you doing something about those tractor trailers? Those
Hot
trucks?
tubs.
Yeah, hot tubs.
We continue to work on entertainment, transportation, and we're going to keep working on it.
It's 2 years in a row it's failed in the legislature,
Well,
correct?
it's yes, I guess that's a good way to put it.
Well,
Never mind.
it's still technically alive for next year.
I make a motion to approve the new company applications that are listed of Kairos, Victory Ground, We Love Nashville, and Wisdom Al Saudi doing business as Sam Moss Rideshare.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We also have some company name change requests from Smead Limo to Smead Limo LLC and Touch of Class Limousine LLC to Touch of Class DBA Music City Luxury Transportation.
At the last meeting, Smead Limo I had made application. I think the chair called our attention that their LLC, that they were actually, and that was really the gist of what they were doing. They were going to add LLC, they were going to become an LLC. And as he checked online, that LLC apparently was initially filed in 2015 and became inactive in 2018. And it was not our practice at that time to I didn't follow what I should have done. It's my fault. I should have looked. We have a new process in the office. He does not have an LLC as best I can determine from the state of Tennessee. So I would recommend that you either just set it aside until he can come and explain whatever, or you could deny it.
I'll make a motion to deny the change of name application by Smead Limo.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And with respect to Touch of Class Limousine LLC to Touch of Class DBA Music City Luxury Transportation.
He's actually apparently deleting his LLC. However, it is still an active LLC. Let me pass that to the chair. I did go to the website. I did pull it down just to make a determination based on my non-legal review. It appears that this company has an active LLC, even though it would not show in their name under the request they had made.
So just to clarify, these company name change requests, are these the commercial names that they're wanting to use with the public, and we're having to approve those name usage?
Basically, what it requires is when they make application, they put their name in, and if they change anything related to that application, whether it's address or name, the commission's required us to come, and I think actually the ordinance requires y'all to approve it. I would recommend in the future, if we do have an opportunity to make some changes, some of these may not need to come to you, but at the present time, I need you to review them and approve them or deny them.
Well, I'm guessing from his change request, he's wanting to he wants to commercially be known as Music City Luxury Transportation.
That's what I believe it to be.
And so maybe we need to clarify with Mr. Voltaggio if he means to call his company Touch of Class Limousine LLC doing business as Music City Luxury Transportation.
We can ask for additional clarification.
Can I shed a little light on that, being in that field myself? It does have a huge legal as well as insurance implication in the change of name. He gets in an accident, someone sues him because they got injured, and that company name is liable, and if there's another change to that company name, that company going forward is not liable unless it can be connected. So it might allow one name to go forward versus the one name being stopped for business. So as Mr. Field stated, it is very important that the name change be reviewed and to make sure that that is a legal LLC going forward, because it does have or can have some huge legal implications.
I'm looking at his application, and we might have just a Scribner's error on the agenda, because his actual change, he's requesting to change the name of his company to Touch of Class Limousine LLC, DBA Music City Luxury Transportation, from Touch of Class Limousine LLC.
Can you DBA an LLC?
That's not really my area of expertise. I mean, I would think that a DBA is usually a sole proprietor who's doing business as a certain, like, commercial name. So I think it's peculiar, but
Yeah, I don't think
can't
you
really
can, a
give
C
you a
Corp,
legal
S
opinion on
Corp,
that.
or LLC can be DBA.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Pay the money for the legal degree. Just as many times about it as I have incorporated companies, I don't think you can do it.
Which brings me to a question about Steve Limo's application. It makes me reflect upon the motion that just passed. I wonder if it's the cart before the horse situation for Sneed. He's trying to get, he's asking us to allow him to change his name before he goes and does the work at the Secretary of State.
Well, he doesn't even have an active LLC, and he wants to be called an LLC. That's why I think it got denied.
Correct, but I wonder if he wants to get our permission to change his name and then he goes and gets the LLC. Because if he goes and gets the LLC, he's doing business as an LLC, but his name is still Sneed Limo. So he could be in violation of our rules here where he didn't get his name changed before he changed his name. Boy,
That's why I was asking Mr. Fields, like, if he changes the corporate structure from an LLC to an S Corp or C Corp, or decides to abolish it completely, does that really matter? Because are we regulating the name that they use with the public? Or are we regulating the name they used, officially as a formal entity?
And I think we're regulating what they're presenting to the public.
Right.
That's our interest, that they're not misleading to the public. Because I believe you made the comment before that if Sneed Limo starts advertising as Sneed Limo LLC, they may look more important or more official than just Sneed Limo.
Commissioner McNally, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think I can maybe answer the question. While we were talking, I looked it up on the Secretary of State's website. It appears that Sneed Limo LLC was incorporated as an LLC, and right now they are currently inactive because they were administratively dissolved, which usually happens when you fail to file your annual report. So my suspicion is that they were already an LLC, but they didn't do what they had to do bureaucratically to keep that LLC active. So that is the problem, not that they hadn't changed it yet.
And what year did they get dissolved?
2015.
It's been a long time.
2015, yeah.
And
They haven't done it in 5 years.
And I'm just wondering if he was requesting to be able to change his name to the LLC and then go reapply with the Secretary of State to become an LLC.
I mean, all he has to do is get his annual reports up to date, and he can be reinstated, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess.
Oh, he's
part
got
of
to
what-
go back and pay the.
44.
I would probably want to hear from folks as to why they're doing it now and they're not an LLC yet, before I necessarily I may have jumped the gun on my motion to deny his change. Have we heard from Mr.?
We've left him messages
Okay, so he's
to encourage him to come to the meeting and bring proof.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I'll look back on the
Yeah, it was last month, I think.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you could, I guess, reconsider the issue and set it and let it set in limbo until, if he does come back, and then he could come in front of you, if you wanted to do that.
Might
rather
reflect
than-
on why he hasn't filed since 2015.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, how often the Secretary of State updates their website, but the inactive status is current.
Well, Mr. Fields, if you've reached out to him and made requests for him to show up with proof and he hasn't responded, I'm not interested in reconsidering the motion that was passed.
And we've left messages.
And with respect to Touch of Class, if you look at the filing information submitted with this request to change the company name,
And
it's probably, again, it's an assumed name. So his formal name of his company is Touch of Class Limousine LLC. If you look at the second page of the filing information, under active assumed names, he's listed Music City Luxury Transportation.
And it appears, I'm going to believe that it appears to be an application error. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. There appears to be an application. He actually sent an email and said, I have added a DBA name to an existing LLC. Do I have to file any paperwork for the commission to approve? The commission's name will be as follows, exactly what the chair just said. Touch of Class Limousines LLC, doing business as Music City Luxury Transportation. And then he forwarded it, he said, I'll forward in for additional information. So he has, I'm assuming in the application, there was just, in the form, there was just some confusion on the form, but it does not appear there was any deception, and he does have the well, I'll end that.
I mean, I'm finding Touch of Class Limousine administratively dissolved also.
I just pulled it up. I just pulled it up last
This is
week.
active,
sure.
perpetual, member managed.
Okay, maybe it's a different one. A Touch of Class Limousine. Oh, okay, this
LLC.
is Limousine Service LLC.
I actually, when I did Touch of Class, I just did a general search. I had a lot of different kind of businesses involved.
There are. Okay, I see Touch of Class Limousine. Okay, that is active. I'm sorry.
That is why I guess there needs to be a little bit of carefulness in Touch of Class LLC DBA.
Well, he's done what he's supposed to do. So if you were to search Music City Luxury Transportation on the Tennessee Secretary website, you would get this. You would get Touch of Class Limousine LLC
Well, let me try that.
as an assumed name.
Oh, did he? Let's see. That should say any of the names they use. Let's see.
So, does this Division of Business Services Records?
Yes, it does say Music City Luxury Transportation on there. That's right.
Does that answer our question that you can have a DBA?
Well, I think it's,
I
I
think
don't
he's
think it's a
using
DB, it's an
DBA
assumed
inartfully.
name. Yeah, he's
It's
using
an
it.
assumed name, yeah.
It's an assumed
Yeah.
name.
But the question to begin with, if we're going to allow him to change his name to DBA,
Probably
Music
should have
City,
said also
what?
known as or
yeah,
something.
AKA.
I mean, you could change the motion to say to allow him to use the assumed name, Music City Luxury Transportation.
But it does appear the Secretary of State has approved him changing his name to put the assumed name. Yeah,
Correct.
okay.
And that was my only question, to make sure that there were, under the assumed name, two companies are not operating under that name. And I only say that because a DBA had been set up before under a company that I owned, and I only noticed it as one of their trucks went by, and I was like, that's not one of mine, and why is that name on it? The only reason I brought that up.
That would be a shock, isn't it?
Well, it would appear that we've done our due diligence to determine whether this is appropriate.
Why don't we tell Mr. I don't want Ms. Voltaggio that we'll approve a company name change to Touch of Class Limousine LLC, AKA Music City Luxury Transportation.
It comes up either way you search for it. The same company comes up. So like if somebody was injured by their business, they would be able to search and find their registered agent and find somebody to serve, so.
And if it's registered, they wouldn't allow it to be duplicated anyway.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Secretary of State also does trademark registrations, but I mean, I think that that is a little bit of a different issue. I'm not sure if they cross-check assumed names against like registered trademarks.
Well, they would have to have an EIN if they're not a DBA, and they're not going to duplicate it under an EIN because that's a federal filing.
Okay, I mean, yeah, you know, it seems to come up, the only thing that comes up when you type in Touch of Class Limousine I actually didn't even do the LLC, I just did Touch of Class Limousine, and the only thing that came up was this company that is actually, I'm sorry, I typed in Music City Luxury Transportation, and the only thing that came up was Touch of Class Limousine LLC.
Well, would we be safer using the language that's actually in the Secretary of State's document and suggest to Mr. Vaglio that the DBA ought to be changed to active assumed name Music City Luxury Transportation?
That would be my suggestion.
All right. Yeah.
And that comes off of page 2 of the Secretary of State's document. So it would be Touch of Class Limousine LLC to Touch of Class Limousine LLC, active assumed name Music City Luxury Transportation.
Okay, so basically, we would ask him to, we think that he should take DBA out and put active assumed name in.
Correct.
Okay, and I can bring that to you next month. I mean, unless you want to approve it.
I'll make a motion that if Mr. I apologize, give me just a
Valtaggio.
Mr. Valtaggio agrees to the modification of removing DBA and replacing it with active assumed name, that his request for a name change be approved.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
passes. Any other new business, Mr. Fields?
No, sir, we may have a lot next month. Next month is the annual hearing for emergency taxi cab zones. There have been no requests for changes. There have been no requests for modifications. We will have to have the public hearing, but it becomes an exercise unless, so there's nothing for you to decide other than we have to have it by ordinance. I will be inviting all of the emergency companies to be present. But again, there'll be no business. So I just want to advise you of that. No more new business today, Mr. Chairman.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.